Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, November 11th, 2020. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Washington Bureau Chief of the Intercept, the Democratic soul searching. Meanwhile, the Republican election fraud grift begins to crumble while COVID rages out of control in the upper Midwest and the vast majority of our country. Trump fires the civilian leadership of the military, installs a bunch of cronies. Early polls show Georgia's runoff super tight. The EU charges Amazon with antitrust violations, and the Supreme Court hears that ACA case indicates the desire to crush the law may very well fail. The Alaska Senate race called for the Republican Dan Sullivan. California fails to reverse the odious Proposition 13. And a new study calls for limiting indoor capacity to fight the COVID surge we are facing. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us today. The ongoing story of Donald Trump hiding in the White House, refusing to come out, refusing to concede. I mean, frankly, I don't think I personally don't care if Donald Trump ever concedes. But more importantly, it is to allow the next administration to begin to do the work to deal with, at the very least, a raging pandemic in the country. We have a situation now where we're on the brink of various states having hospitals completely overrun. We are now at the highest level of hospitalization we have been at during this pandemic in this country. And this does not look to be a momentary blip. This is not, we're just going to peak over where we were in April and drop back down. The trajectory of this thing is starting to look like a rocket, frankly. The 7-day average is now at 123,000. Almost every day now we're hitting new records for infections. On Tuesday, the hospitalizations hit 62,000. That is a record. Also, the new daily cases passed 139,000 for the first time. The number of people hospitalized with coronavirus has more than doubled since September. That's 5 weeks ago. And understand this happens, this goes exponentially. So it's not going to take 5 weeks for potentially this to double again if we stay on the same trajectory. And all of the headwinds, if you will, are against us. As the weather gets colder, there's reason to believe that transmission becomes easier, both as a function of people being indoors more and as a function of the dryness of the air, the lack of humidity in the air. And then in terms of hospitalizations, particularly in those parts of the country where apparently people just feel like they cannot catch it, you're going to have a typical rate of hospitalizations for the flu, which is going to eat up more bed space, right? I mean, if you have people who are at least wearing masks, they're maintaining some type of social distance, they are washing their hands, they're getting flu vaccines, hopefully the number of flu hospitalizations will be lower, because this is all about capacity in the hospitals. And in El Paso, they're having to bring in more refrigerated mobile morgues. And we're going to start seeing this around the country. It's a real problem. And so I don't care if Donald Trump comes out and congratulates Joe Biden. Who cares? I mean, I understand the norms and the accoutrements of a peaceful transition of power. But the real issue is sign over all of those assets that a presidential transition team needs to start building their capacity. I don't know. We'll ask Ryan Grimm about these firings at the Pentagon, if they were just out of spite or if it's not like a two-step spite and a function of making it that much harder on a new administration. But it's appalling. It is appalling what we're seeing from Republican lawmakers. And what is even more appalling in some respects is the both sides. One aspect of it is the both siderisms of this. Put up that tweet, Matt, of Howie Kurtz. Is he the media reporter? What is some reporter for Fox? Like, I don't know, like the culture. What is Howard Kurtz's actual title these days? He used to be like a media reporter for Fox News. I don't know what he's doing now, but this is a perfect example of like, are you serious? Put this up where he is equating what Donald Trump is doing from Trump's GSA barring the Biden transition officials. This is the Government Services Administration not signing off and allowing all the resources that you need so that our next presidential administration can start the job running, essentially. That is equal to, are you ready to this? To Whoopi Goldberg telling Donald Trump's voters to suck it up. Both sides are playing the politics of payback. I mean, on one side, you have millions of dollars, resources in terms of office space, in terms of the actual functioning of our government being withheld. And on the other side, you have one of the hosts of The View being mean. How much more twisted can you get? How do they get away with this? I think there's a lot of issues in terms of our society, broadly speaking, and there's problems within the media. But also part of it is a function of the way that Democrats are reacting to this. Let's play this clip from Chris Coons, and I'll show you how sort of like how Chris Coons here is, what he's doing here is indicative of a major problem that Democrats have had for at least for the past 2 decades, as far as I can tell. But it's stunning to see this.
This is an uncertain time, these next 71 days. I think it is past time for Republican leaders to stand up and say we should accept the results of this election. And I continue to work with colleagues to urge them to do so.
Do you see any evidence that Republican leaders are doing that? Will do that.
I see no evidence of voter fraud in the key states that would need to have their outcomes changed. And I so far see little evidence of any Republicans standing up to the president. There have been 4 so far here in the Senate. My hope is that this is the week when that will begin to turn, as it is clear there is no possible pathway for the president to overturn these results. And we are beginning to threaten the foundations of our democracy, which is a regular, orderly, peaceful transfer of power after every quadrennial election.
What are they telling you behind the scenes?
Bluntly, that they accept that. They call me to say, congratulations, please convey my well wishes to the president-elect, but I can't say that publicly yet. And so
when?
These are conversations best kept private.
Okay, and when will they be able to say that publicly?
My job here, I think, is to continue to urge them privately to do the right thing and to help the president accept reality and to help their caucus stand up publicly, because, frankly, the transition is going to be chaotic at best if it doesn't get moving.
There it is, right? Everything is fine until Chris Coons basically says, look, they're just a little bit nervous. Everybody understands that they're a little bit nervous. And the bottom line is the way that politics works is if Mitch McConnell, if all these Republicans are going to run this play where they publicly say we need to stall, we need to wait, there could be, we're going to basically undercutting a Biden administration, working up their followers into a lather. If the Republicans are going to do that, then it's incumbent upon the Democrats to make them pay a political price. So the answer to is, what are they saying to you privately, is nothing. Nothing. You want me to reveal that privately they're actually good guys. Privately, they're a little concerned about this. They're not monsters. Whatever it is. The answer to what they're saying to you privately is nothing. I haven't heard from them. They are hell-bent on this because you make them pay for what they're saying publicly. And if those Republican lawmakers want to go on to Fox News and say, privately, I actually did say to Chris Coons that I wanted the president, then they can do that. But you don't let them off the hook. And you see this from reporters. Jake Tapper had a long piece that was good in terms of expressing the outrage about the fact that Biden is Trump is not leaving the office. But then you don't report privately. They're actually not being so irresponsible. No, it is their public actions that are problematic, and you make them live with those and pay for those. You don't let them off the hook. This is the Democrats lack a political instinct. And there is not a single moderate voter in the entire country who's going to go, I sort of think that Chris Coons is holding back and he's not telling us what they're saying privately. No, you do not let them off the hook. If they're going to make any type of move, even if you're going to lose in this situation, which is we're losing days that the Biden administration could ramp up, you make them pay a price politically. That's the way you do politics. Now, a word from our sponsors. You've heard me say many times, I feel completely overworked. I'm overwhelmed many times. Got my kids yelling at me. Got to deal with my parents, just on and on and on. The cats. Well, how do I find time to sit down and read things that are not like at the top of my list of priorities? It's an app called Blinkist. It's for anyone who cares about learning, but doesn't have a lot of time to do so. It takes the key insights and ideas from 4,000 nonfiction bestsellers in over 27 categories, gathers them together in 15-minute text and audio explainers, or what they call blinks. So what a blink does, it allows you basically, it takes all the key takeaways. So it allows you to get through a topic quickly. You don't need the purple prose, as it were. Blinkist has even teamed up with popular podcast creators to blink those for you too, so you can get to the heart of a podcast episode fast. Are they doing ours? It might make up for my slow cadence. 15 million people are already using Blinkist to broaden their knowledge in 27 nonfiction categories like self-improvement, management, mindfulness, and more. Like I say, I use Blinkist. Just trying to do a little bit of exercise these days, but I'm not trying to do that much. But 15 minutes, I can listen to the key takeaways of a book. Like, I keep talking about that Tim Ferriss book all the time, but Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I don't need all the stuff in between. Give me the 15 minutes with the top key messages there. The Barefoot Investor by Scott Pape. I may check it out. I don't like to spend a lot of time reading about investing, but I also feel like sometimes like I should know some stuff. But I'm not going to read Rick Wilson's full book with all due respect, but I'm curious as to, how he's presenting. Well, Blinkist allows you to do it. You can also use Blinkist Shortcast to quickly catch up on podcast episodes you've missed. Right now, Blinkist has a special offer for just our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/Majority Report. You start your 7-day free trial, and then you get 25% off a Blinkist premium membership. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist. That's Blinkist.com/Majority Report. Get 25% off and a 7-day free trial. Blinkist.com/Majority Report. And I am not only the proud owner of a Quip toothbrush, but both my children have Quip toothbrushes. My ex-wife now has a Quip toothbrush. My sister has a Quip toothbrush. And why? Because good health starts with good oral hygiene. I got fixated on oral hygiene a couple of years ago when I realized how much money I could end up paying in the dentist. You get older, you get a little worried about it. Well, Quip electric toothbrush has timed sonic vibrations. So when you're dealing with your kid, they have smaller toothbrush heads with your kid. You don't have to have them count or sing the alphabet really fast to get through everything. No, 30 seconds, each quadrant of your mouth, boom, you're done, 2 minutes. They also have anti-cavity toothpaste. They have eco-friendly refillable floss dispensers. They got watermelon toothpaste for kids. He loves it. And what they do is they send you a new brush head, toothpaste, and floss on a dentist recommended schedule every 3 months for just $5. And shipping is free. Join over 3 million happy customers using Quip at $25. That's where it starts. So if you go to getquip.com/majority right now, you'll get your first refill free. That's your first refill free. Getquip.com/majority, spelled getquip, QUIP.com/majority. Quip, the good habits company. Also, one more day of getting 10% off at comesincolors.com for the masks and for the mask carriers that clip on, or you can wear them around with a lanyard. Comes in colors. And you use the coupon code 4 Seasons, one word, 4 Seasons. You don't have to put hotel. You don't have to put landscaping. You just use the word 4 Seasons. You get 10% off. Great stuff. My daughter is going crazy over that stuff. So it's nice to have a mask holder. All right. I'd like to welcome to the show Ryan Grimm. He is the DC Bureau Chief at the Intercept, host of the Intercepted podcast, and also author of We've Got People, from Jesse Jackson to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, The End of Big Money and the Rise of a Movement. Ryan Grimm, welcome to the show. Ryan?
Looks like he's still connecting to audio, so hopefully that will be...
Well, Ryan, we're watching Ryan connect to audio. He's looking good. He's wore a sport coat today. That's nice. We're still waiting for Ryan to connect. There we go. Ryan, can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I gave you a very nice introduction, but your audio hadn't connected yet. You're looking.
I'm going to take your word for it.
Very dapper.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Dressed up for you.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you. I appreciate that. So Ryan, let's get right into this. Okay. I got a couple of questions that I just want to ask as you, as someone who is in Washington around some of the reporting. And then I want to get into this question of the soul searching that we're seeing within the particularly the Democratic House caucus. The Senate just seems to be, well, whatever. But one, what can you tell me about what's going on with the Pentagon? Like what do you have you in the course of your reporting heard any theories as to like what is the value? Is Donald Trump just doing this out of spite? Are there other members of the administration who are like, well, he wants to do it out of spite, but it's also going to like set Biden back, 4 to 6 weeks, because it's one thing for him to leave Mike Esper in there. It's another to leave in, guys who were calling Barack Obama a secret Muslim.
So at the Intercept, we've been doing some reporting on this over the past several weeks, and it appears like a version of this, has been planned, regardless of the election outcome. That if he lost, there was all sorts of opportunities for the kind of mischief that you're talking about. And also the kind of mischief that would be much more relevant if the election were closer, and and he had a chance to kind of steal it. But so those he had those plans on the shelves, and at the same time, if he was reelected, it was going to be a kind of gloves off second term Trump, where he really went to war with his deep state enemies, and in order to win that war was plotting to decapitate the not just the Pentagon, CIA, and elsewhere, and try to put loyalists in there, although he's kind of running out of 25-year-olds that he can put into these places consistently. So maybe fortunately for him, he's running out of runway, as this is just going to run through January. Now, the way that it's being talked about internally is that he very much wants to get the troops home from Afghanistan by Christmas, and that this is going to help him do that. That's the kind of the way that his loyalists are selling this internally, and arguing that a lot of the Pentagon brass might try to use the lame duck to drag their feet to keep troops in Afghanistan to a point where then they can, they can pressure Biden to keep that endless war going that much longer. And I don't think we should completely dismiss that. I think that as a matter of fact, that is in general what Pentagon brass does when it comes to this particular war and wars in general. Whether that's Trump's leading motivating factor is quite dubious.
Right. I was going to say, like, I'm fully. It's not hard for me to accept the fact that that a military that's been occupying that country now for 20 years is still interested in maintaining that. There's a lot of people making a lot of money off of
right.
That,
they want another 20 or so.
But the idea that Donald Trump's like, I want to do one good thing before I leave, or I really care that much about policy, and that's what I want my legacy to be. I find that a little bit hard to believe. But
right. But all the incentives are lined up in the same direction. It's also a chance for him to scratch a grievance that he's long held against those folks. I mean, we had a bunch of reporting a month ago that he talks trash about the military constantly. He's kind of impressed and in awe of some of these generals, the beefy, handsome ones. But at the same time, he thinks they're all idiots and losers and are just looking for their next paycheck, from Raytheon. So this is a way for him to kind of scratch that itch as well.
All right. So just to be clear, this is more fetishistic than fascist. On some level for him firing these people. I really do think he just gets off with it. I think he really just gets off on the idea that he could fire these people, and he thinks, but all right. That was question one. Second one is stimulus. Has there been any? I know Mitch McConnell sort of like on day one before he slid into, oh, wait a second, there's value in here for me to hop on the election denialism train. But for a day, it seemed like he was saying we should really get to a stimulus. And gosh knows what that's going to look like coming out of the Senate. But is there any talk whatsoever? I mean, unemployment is running out and has been running out for people for months in many respects. But it's starting to crest, and we're also starting to see cuts in states and cities. Is there any talk of a stimulus at all? And do you think it would involve extended unemployment? Would it involve one-time checks, multiple-time checks?
The talk is that McConnell is very closely watching the polls in Georgia, and pretty much everything he does between now and January 6th, the date of those two elections, Warnock and Ossoff against Loeffler and Perdue, is going to be guided by his desire to make sure he wins both of those, because he has gotten himself into a situation where if Dan Sullivan has won the Alaska race, he needs to win, right? He needs to win at least one of those Georgia Senate elections to maintain control of the Senate. Republicans are heavily favored in both because of the patterns of turnout in the past, where Republicans come out at higher levels in these runoff elections than Democrats do traditionally. But you can't necessarily take any of that to the bank, because we're in kind of uncharted territory. Are these people coming out without Trump at the top of the ticket anymore? And so, the way that McConnell is kind of fueling the Trump's kind of discrediting of the election is thought to be related to that. If he wants to keep the Trump people angry and engaged even without Trump around. And so the stimulus notches into it in the same way. If he feels like talking about a stimulus is good politics, good electoral politics in Georgia, then he's going to talk about the stimulus. If he thinks that passing one is good politics, then he'll do that. So all of it just depends on what Perdue and Loeffler are going to need to win in January.
All right.
So he is talking about a very skinny stimulus, no state and local aid.
Right.
Debt certainly would have to have. He would insist on liability protections for businesses, and basically the offer that he was putting up earlier probably
right. So
ratcheted up a little bit.
That raises two things. One is we would have been better off, and by we I just mean Americans, basically, had Pelosi just taken Mnuchin's deal, regardless of what it was at this point, because it was never going to be as good as what McConnell's going to produce. I mean, even to the extent that was real. But I have, there's reason to believe that if Pelosi said yes, they would have just come in with that 1.8, because then it would have looked bad for the president, and the president was worried about that. But so put that miscalculation aside by Nancy Pelosi. Is there, and this segues into what I wanted to talk to you about in terms of like this internecine, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, fight amongst the Democrats. Is there anything that you can point to as someone who is the DC bureau chief of the Intercept that is analogous to Mitch McConnell strategizing to help Georgia? Like any active, like who is the person that is doing what McConnell is doing in the Senate?
So Schumer, to his credit, has been a lot more aggressive lately in trying to push the Democratic messaging in a bolder direction. He came out right after the election saying, that what Biden ought to do is cancel $50,000 in student debt across the board for everybody by executive fiat. That doesn't immediately play into a Senate argument, but it doesn't matter, because that kind of pushes out to the public that, look, if Democrats are in control, Democrats are going to wipe out up to $50,000 worth of your student debt. And there are a lot of people who have more debt than that, but there are a ton, millions of people who would have all of their debt wiped out by that. And that is the kind of thing that Democrats need to do, to try to explain to people, okay, why should I bother to come out and vote? What is the Biden agenda that's actually going to help? Now, Schumer has also talked about legalizing marijuana. that is something that you can explain to people as a difference between the party. What is something that voters would actually get if they come out. Biden, on the other hand, doesn't seem like he's taking it remotely seriously. There's some thought that maybe he has PTSD from 1992, where Bill Clinton, after winning, went and campaigned in one of these Georgia runoffs, and the Republican won, and people felt like it made Bill Clinton look bad. And so reverting back to this old politician's way of thinking that the best way not to lose is to never try. Because if you try and you fail, then you're a loser. But if you never tried anything, then hey, you're undefeated.
I think people. I mean, I think we have definitely talked about over the course of the past 4 years that it at the very least we've characterized it as making Donald Trump look weak if he goes in, he campaigns in a special election, and his chosen candidate loses. It is perceived as a weakness on that part. I mean, so from that respect, I suppose I understand it. But there's a difference, of course, between Biden going into the state to campaign, which I think I saw today some reporting suggested he wasn't interested in doing that, but they're thinking about sending Obama down there. That to me, makes some sense, I guess. But there could be things where he's talking about of what the value of having a Democratic Senate is. And I have not heard that really so much. It's good to see that Schumer's doing that because Schumer's got to worry about his primary. I am of the mind now that I think senators should be facing primaries every 2 years based upon what I've seen it doing in terms of clarifying Chuck Schumer's perspective on this. Let me just get your take on this. So we just watched a clip of Chris Coons before he came on, where he was talking about how reprehensible it is that you have Republicans, lawmakers, senators in particular, who are not coming out and telling Donald Trump to give up the ghost and particularly, sign the have the GSA sign off so that we can get this thing going. And then he's asked, what are they saying privately? And he goes, well, privately, they're actually, wishing congratulations to Joe Biden. And they're telling me that they wish this wasn't happening, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't that undercut the message? Like when you say, when they're taking a public position, like, isn't that what, if you're a Republican lawmaker and you're doing this publicly for the 70 million people who voted for Donald Trump or whoever your constituencies are that love Donald Trump, and you're doing it to rile up the base in Georgia, you get to do that publicly, but then you get to cover your rear flank essentially by having Chris Coons go on national television and say, deep down in their hearts, they're actually really nice people and they're congratulating Joe Biden. I mean, doesn't that undercut the message?
It shows that they're not terribly principled in their authoritarianism, I suppose. You're right. But it also does show, how thoroughly Trumpism has taken over this party. And the way that matters is probably not going to be in this attempted soft coup, hard coup that Trump has going on in the background. But every operative who's in his or her late teens, early 20s, who's rising into the Republican Party right now, is watching this authoritarian strain spread and take over the entire party. And what they're learning is that the way to rise through this party and the values of this party are anti-democratic, are absolutely win at all costs. Democrats are enemies of the people. And what matters is taking power and holding it, even if you have to undo, 200 plus years of democratic institutions in the country.
Who also learned that lesson was Amy Coney Barrett, Britt Kavanaugh, and John Roberts, who worked on the sort of version one of a power grab 20 years ago down in Florida, as the Supreme Court chose essentially George W. Bush to be president. All right, so let's move to the House and talk about this sort of this fight that has broken out in the House. And to me, which keeps sort of striking me is this is exactly what we saw in 2018. where the first month of a democratically controlled Congress was ostensibly dedicated to passing H.R. 1, which was actually a pretty good bill in terms of voting rights, in terms of like ethics, in terms of anti-corruption.
Public financing, even.
Public financing.
Matching funds for candidates, yeah.
It was a great bill that nobody heard of because Nancy Pelosi joined in on attacks on Ilhan Omar. And you go back, like literally on the day that they had passed that, the top story was about Ilhan Omar. And we're seeing this over again. They're doing it again. They launch into an attack on a, what will you tell the story of this phone call that was, and I wonder, you know, I'm always very suspicious about things that like, we never meant for this to get out, even though we had a half a dozen reporters on the phone at the time. Will you tell that story?
Well, the reporters weren't exactly on the phone, but right. So it's, you know, they used to have caucus meetings in, you know, and soon they'll again be having some caucus meetings indoors, maybe masked up. But the way that the caucus has been meeting privately is over conference call, and some staff call into these conference calls as well. Although even before it moved to a Zoom conference calls, you were having a lot of members who would text reporters in real time. You know, this is what so-and-so just said. This is what this person just said. Because this one went on for 3 hours, it became kind of a public spectacle. And because it actually mattered and people were really pouring their hearts out, that you started hearing that centrist after centrist, you know, with Abigail Spanberger kind of being the most florid in her denunciations, were coming to the microphone, or I guess pressing *1 or whatever, to be able to unburden themselves about the burden that progressivism and what they called socialism, you know, had brought to their campaign, saying that, you know, that because of words like Medicare for all and socialism and defund the police, but they lost a lot of very good members, and they have to stop this right now. And, you know, it's childish and it's unprofessional, it's irresponsible. And you had Rashida Tlaib push back and say, look, we don't know yet. You're launching into this analysis without any of the data. But what we do know is that in precincts like hers and like Ilhan Omar's, you know, turnout climbed in substantial ways, and that, you know, without voters in Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Detroit, Joe Biden doesn't win, you know, Pennsylvania, right, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And so maybe while there's still these Georgia Senate specials that are still to be decided, let's not thoroughly trash the progressive wing of the party just yet. So that kicked off this civil war, or this new battle in the Civil War. AOC then responded with an interview in the New York Times, and then she was blamed for kind of launching the war, even though it was in response to the letter, to the call.
But her response, it seems to me, I mean, because I don't know, was there any candidates that were running on, on a defund the police slogan? I mean, there's obviously this is
no, and actually, so I actually talked to some Republican campaigners about this, and they said the only district where they seriously went in on defund the police was Anthony Brindisi's, because they said he has more of a Trump kind of culturally conservative district where that message would resonate. Whereas
where's Brindisi's? Where is
he's outside New York somewhere, right? Like up in upstate New York, kind of Trumpish area that Democrats flipped in 2018. And so all of the other ones, they studied it hard. They wanted to hit Democrats with the best shot they could. Defund the police wasn't really what was resonating. What they did instead was they support, the law and order, the Trump message of like the Portland chaos is going to come to you. You're not going to be safe in your neighborhoods. Democrats just aren't going to protect you. So it wasn't really around defund the police, and those candidates weren't running on defund the police. Defund the police is a slogan. I think it's not a great slogan. It's a slogan that came from the ground up from protests. And so what are centrist Democrats saying? Like we can't have protests anymore. Protesters can't have signs.
All right, we should say also there seems to be major construction going on in your house right now, so I don't want anybody to I don't want one of those things like, how come nobody notices that? That's all right. But yes, the defund it does feel like they're complaining about the protests, and which is for politicians, it's basically like we're going to complain about the fact that it's raining. As a, like I'm sorry, that exists. We know the data. We know that registration went up significantly in the wake of the BLM protests. We know that at least on the presidential level, without that registration, without that surge of votes from urban centers, that you may not have a President Biden right now. And so they're looking for a scapegoat, and it seems to me. And what was interesting to me, and this is the thing that I really do appreciate about AOC, is that her response was less about adopt this ideological perspective and more about you need to get best practices. I mean, she talked about digital space, but even Doug Jones, who lost in Alabama, had a quote in the Washington Post, I think it was, where he said the problem with the DCCC and the DSCC is that they invest in candidates. They don't invest in voters. In other words, there's no organizing going on. It is like, we've got an election 6 weeks out. Now it's time to just, pour money into the candidates. And this is what it seems to me is what AOC has been saying too. And a lot of like reformers of the Democratic Party apparatus, not necessarily from an ideological perspective, they sometimes correlate, but you can have a fight over the ideology and you can also have a fight over the apparatus and the best practices. And it seems to me like there's a conflation. When Jim Clyburn weighs in and says, this is about to fund the police and blah, 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 as opposed to, hey, how come there's no on the ground organizing? The one place that we saw it was in Georgia, right? Where there's been an apparatus. Right.
Actually, to even further buttress your point, the other place we saw it was in Arizona, because largely Latino groups there had been organizing against Sheriff Arpaio for a decade plus, and had over the past several years gotten an influx of investment nationally to kind of allow them to really build on the organizing that they'd been doing over all of those years. And so you had this community that organized for a particular political goal. They accomplished that goal, throwing Arpaio out, and in accomplishing that goal, they built political power, and they built a political constituency that had solidarity with the people that stood with them through that fight, and they were able to deliver to deliver Arizona for Biden and for Democrats. But you're right, that doesn't happen anywhere else, and there's this kind of mismatch between the way that Democrats are approaching politics and the kind of populist moment that we're in right now. And Doug Jones understands that, because he understands that there are so many of these weird voters in Alabama who they hate both leaderships of both parties and are actually persuadable between the kind of two wildly different wings of the two different parties. And, because he's been going around Alabama for so long, he has seen that. Whereas the kind of Washington Democrat approach is to say, all right, we're gonna run a bunch of polls, and we're gonna see which particular message, if we drop $1 million on it in the local TV network, is going to move the polling numbers 3 points over the course of the next 2 weeks. And they do that polling, and it turns out that people want their drug prices to be lower than they want them to be higher, if those are their choices. Yeah, how about that? Lower.
All right. Well,
if you need to write that down, so you can remember that people want lower drug prices. And if you have a pre-existing condition, that you are entitled to continue to live, so they poll those things, and those poll quite well. They cut those ads. They re-poll a week or two later after they've spent $1 million running these ads on TV. The people remember seeing those ads. They remember the name. the polling numbers go up. Everybody gets a cut along the way. Whether it's somewhere between 8 and 15% of whatever that media buy was, everybody is happy. You go to the polls, it turns out that didn't really sink in, because of course everybody likes low drug prices, but what else is going on, and what else does the Democratic Party represent? Who does it represent? What organizing has gone on in the community to show that this is a party that you ought to have solidarity with at the polls? And so you're right, there may be this disconnect between just the fundamental way that Democrats think they ought to campaign and the intensity of the populist moment that we're in now.
What did the argument from the moderates? I mean, on some level, there seems to be like there's sort of a bait and switch quality to this argument. It seems to me, right, where you have the more sort of like grassroots oriented and ideologically to the left Democrats, and although Doug Jones, I guess maybe relative to Alabama, he's to the left, but I mean. He's making this argument too. You need to invest in the district, not in the politician. You need to build an apparatus on the ground that exists separate from and is more durable than a certain campaign that an individual is going to run at any given time. I mean, that to me seems like a very basic message. And frankly, I mean, if I was, the squad, I would be traveling around with Doug Jones talking about that because, apparently they can't undercut his message by saying he's so far to the left. He doesn't know what it is to run in some place outside of New York. Right. I mean, that to me seems like to be the clearest expression of somebody who understands the dynamic that's going on here. What was ostensibly the message that the moderates were running on that got stepped on? Like, what was the message? Was it just, we're going to protect your pre-existing conditions? That was the whole message?
Well, the moderate message was, I think, pretty well summed up by the Joe Biden campaign, which is that we're going to get rid of Donald Trump. We're going to restore decency, but nothing will fundamentally change. And that's the message that these moderates want. It was seen as a gaffe when Biden said that, but it wasn't. That's the message that moderates wanted to convey to a lot of the suburban voters who, they've been, they were winning over in 2018 and to lesser extent 2016, and that they were kind of banking the rise of this new Democratic Party on. And unfortunately, it feels like it worked too well.
Well, yes.
So
I mean, yes.
If you got Biden,
me, right? Exactly, yes. Exactly. And the Democrats did nothing to tie the Republican Party to Donald Trump. So the idea was like, I got you. You're right. We're going to get rid of Donald Trump, and nothing else will change. Nothing. I won't change anything else. I mean,
right.
They literally
keep the House as it is. Keep the Senate as it is. Yeah.
That is. I mean, that to me seems like an unbelievably short-sighted message. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Like, okay, it works for Joe Biden because Joe Biden's the one actually running against Donald Trump. But if you go around and you put down Republicans, you platform them at your convention, and you talk about the good Republicans, and you embrace other Republicans, and you say secretly they're telling us we don't like Donald Trump, but they won't say it publicly. Well, then how do you hope that the person you're running against for Congress is going to be tainted by Donald Trump? You've just basically given the entire script for your challenger.
Right. And so people like Katko in Syracuse, where the Democrats were running against her, or Bacon in Omaha, those are fairly popular, well-liked Republicans who, if you're sending the message that, Republicans aren't the problem is Donald Trump and bad Republicans, then it's quite reasonable for a voter in Syracuse or Omaha to say, okay, well, I actually like my guy, Representative Katko, and this Representative Bacon, he's a nice guy. I've seen him at an event. He's not like Donald Trump. And another thing that Republican operatives have said is that it's not that Democrats really tried hard to tie Trump to a lot of these Republicans, but it's also difficult to do because Trump is such a unique figure. And so you can't, you're just some boring politician is not Trump. So you have to say, well, they're Trump enablers. And, they created the conditions that allowed somebody like Trump to come into power. And so for their cowardice, for their enabling, they are therefore bad, and they need to go, whether or not they spoke at the Little League event or not. But that's you said it really well, because Kasich and others spoke at the convention. These are good Republicans, then fine.
It's also not a project you can do over the course of a 3-month campaign. Like, you need to start this 4 years ago. You need to start this 4 years ago, where you tie Donald Trump to the Republicans, and the Democrats have refused in a virulent way to do that. They
aggressively wanted to go the other way because they wanted to be validated by all of these never Trump Republicans and have their view that Trump is somebody different, and that there are good Republicans. MSNBC is, no offense to Peacock, has a ton of Republicans who tell the MSNBC viewing audience that, look, this is these are bad Republicans, we're the good Republicans. So
without a doubt, but it's not Comcast's job to say that Republicans have enabled Donald Trump. Honestly,
right.
I'm not. If it was up to me, I wouldn't program it that way, because I'm attempting to make that point about Republicans. But the Democrats have. Because I think your assessment is true. But the Democrats, they need to do this first, right? Like, if they're not cleaving, if they're not tying Donald Trump or their local congressman to Donald Trump, or Mitch McConnell to Donald Trump, or Paul Ryan, who incidentally was one of those people who pushed this whole California voting, late votes coming in 2017. That's suspicious. There's been many opportunities to tie the Republicans to Donald Trump, and daring them, to vote against them, vote for that stimulus. Make Mitch McConnell either vote against him or not. Like, make them actually behave in the way that they're communicating. Again, it gets back to, Chris Coons basically saying, we're going to give Republicans the advantage of supporting Donald Trump when they want to, but also the advantage of them actually not really supporting Donald Trump. And so if we get rid of Donald Trump, they'll be fine. Joe Biden said this over and over and over again. He told people we need a Republican Party. And he said this during the campaign, and it helped him.
Go ahead. No, Pelosi said the exact same thing. We need a strong Republican Party. And Biden talked about having a Republican as his running mate. And everyone in the audience, when he said that, laughed, and he Chase. He was like, no. I'm not telling a joke here. I'm serious. I would love to have a Republican as my running mate. I don't think that there are any right now that, because of the current conditions, that I could put on my ticket. But I would do it. And so that, if that's the signal that you're sending to voters, then there shouldn't be any surprise at all that voters said, okay, well then we'll do Biden and a bunch of Republicans.
So are there any figures in the Democratic Party, other than, what we've heard from Tlaib and from AOC, who have this a similar perspective on what went wrong? Or are we going to just hear that it's the progressives' fault and, go through this cycle again?
Well, Schumer is the most fascinating case, because yes, he has a re-election in 2022 and would much prefer to avoid a primary challenge rather than grapple with primary challenge. At the same time, Schumer is quite a well-known political animal. This is somebody who has spent his entire life kind of reading political tea leaves and divining what the correct direction is. And I do get the sense that he actually is aware of the realignment and the populist anger that's out there. It's not obvious that he's going to be able to be the one that can lead it. He's formerly known as Wall Street Chuck. It's not going to be easy for somebody to transition like that, but he does appear to get it. And if he gets it, there are a lot of other senators who trust his kind of political judgment. And so whether they have the capacity to not just absorb that new environment, but actually act on it is an open question at the very best. So it may be that you just need a whole new crop of leaders who get it. But it is starting to dawn on a significant number of Democrats in Washington that what the stakes are in this fight. You would have thought that November 2016 would have brought about this kind of evolution in their thinking and in their understanding of who their opposition is. It did for a few, but particularly Trump resisting the results of the election and a significant number of Republicans, or basically the entire Republican Party, going along with him publicly, has been even more of a wake up call. But like I said, if you've been doing things the same way,
I mean, how many times do you get a wake up call? It's like they keep getting the wake up call, and then they say,
it's noon now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, all right. So lastly, what about in the House? I mean, that's all well and good in the Senate, but if they don't control the Senate, then it really doesn't matter what Chuck Schumer's saying, frankly.
Right. No, the House seems to be further behind in just kind of intellectually and politically in catching up with the moment. And part of it is just the nature of the institution. It's kind of like a middle school cafeteria. It has so many different cliques revolving around that cafeteria and tossing food at each other and talking about who the cool kids are and who the losers are, that it very quickly descends into that type of kind of interpersonal knife fighting, which is makes it hard to then have like a 30,000 foot analysis of where the country is headed. And even if you could have that analysis, it makes it very difficult for people to get on the same team to kind of push in that direction. Something that might be easier in a Senate where you have 48 or 50 members.
To the extent that there's any type of leadership fight, it's happening as to who's going to follow Nancy Pelosi after these 2 years.
Probably. I mean, she's going to have to work hard to lock down. With such a small majority, she can only lose a handful of votes. And so, you could
to become Speaker of the House. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Okay. Right. Because, the Republicans aren't going to vote for her.
Right.
And so you need a majority. And so she's going to need people like most of the squad and people like Josh Gottheimer and the No Labels crew and the Problem Solvers Caucus, all these people that have been hostile to her. She's going to need most of them to agree to vote yes on the House floor.
Is it possible that we could see a sort of trans ideological, attempt to maybe unseat her?
Anything's possible. You've had those. Tim Ryan kind of ran a trans ideological attempt to unseat her, and he might have been premature. He got beaten quite badly, and then kind of embarrassed himself. Pretty sure he ran for president.
Yes, he did.
Yes. So he kind of drained what capital he had with those two defeats. It really comes down to a question of who. I think the idea is a sound one,
right.
But the nature of the House
Any
is that
names?
Everybody says that's the thing.
Yeah.
No, there aren't.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Your right wingers, like, so Hakeem Jeffries is kicked around. Joe Crowley would be probably Speaker by now if AOC hadn't knocked him out. So it would have to be somebody like Jeffries, who enough progressives like, and is also comfortable with the right wing. But the left would probably rather have Pelosi than Jeffries.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I would rather a weak, non-ideologically lined leader at this point than a strong, supposedly ideologically aligned leader, because it sometimes comes and undercuts
so anyone
movements.
Anyone in that job is going to be weak, if you can only lose a few votes.
Good point.
On every vote.
Ryan Grimm, DC bureau chief for the Intercept, as always, a pleasure and very informative. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and be back in just a moment. So just about out of time. We should just say that the ACA was in front of the Supreme Court yesterday, and it appears, we'll play a clip of John Roberts in the second half of the program, but it appears that at least Kavanaugh and Roberts are inclined to side with the three left of center justices in the idea that if Congress decided to defund the mandate or should depenalize the mandate, then in fact Congress did think that mandate was severable from the rest of the law, and you can find the mandate unconstitutional and still keep the law. But we won't know for several months, and we'll have more information on that as it continues. Also, it appears that, we are probably just days away from Donald Trump, giving up the ghost, or at the very least, some Democratic lawmakers may be stopping to pretend like this election is still in question. All right. We will talk more about that tomorrow. And for those of you who are sticking around, thanks for being with us. You can join us in the fun half. Oh, I have a correction to make. It's not just that I say concentric wrong, that it's concentric. But the other day we did a video, where we showed clips of images of a Twitter exchange between Dave Rubin and Andrew Seidel, and it was pretty funny where Seidel basically called Dave Rubin out for his COVID denial. And Dave Rubin then said, "You weren't so harsh with me when you came to my house and had dinner with me." And Seidel was like, "Well, then good. That should be evidence that I don't have a predisposition against you. You should stop what you're doing because it's very dangerous." And they had a DM exchange where Rubin said, "You're being rude and I will not exchange with you." And I characterized Seidel as a libertarian. And in fact, he is not a libertarian. He's progressive. He's an atheist. He's a First Amendment attorney and an author.
Wow.
He apparently volunteered for the Democrats, but he is not a libertarian. I characterized him as such. And he said 4 years ago, he went on Rubin's show as an attorney working to educate about the state-church separation. That was back when Dave Rubin was trying to build his bona fides by being, associated with the New Atheists and Sam Harris. So this is one of those stories about how also Sam Harris sort of platformed Dave Rubin. Apparently Sam Harris is, sadly beginning to realize that like what he's been a part of. I don't know why it took him so long. He's very learned, is my understanding. But and he also says he was in Dave Rubin's house because Dave Rubin's studio is in his house. That's very convenient. So just to be clear, Andrew Seidel is not a libertarian, and I apologize about 1 million times. I don't know if there's anything worse I could say about a person. I'm being a little facetious. There's definitely things worse I could say about a person, but certainly
it's risible.
Huh?
That old-fashioned word, risible or risible.
Yes.
Yeah. Calling somebody a libertarian unwarranted is risible.
Indeed. And so 1,000 apologies. Folks, we're going to head into the fun half of the program wherein we will have fun. That is the plan. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. And don't forget the AM Quickie, available to you every day. Basically, by the time you wake up, unless you wake up super early. Well, it's probably there more around like when you're having your first cup of coffee. Usually they're well before 8 a.m. And it's some headline news that you need in a very quick and convenient package. So check that out. Also, don't forget, Nomi's doing her show today at 3 p.m. The Nomiki show. Don't know who's on today, but she's always having great panels, and this is a great time to check out what she's saying about particularly this little fight that's going on in the Democratic Party. It will blow over, but it is people jockeying for position and power. And hopefully in the next couple of days, we're going to have Paul Reichoff on to do a little bit of a debate about it, because this is what has to happen right now. Fight over Joe Biden's administration, who are going to be the personnel within it, and also a fight over, the direction of the Democratic Party, whether they have the Senate in Georgia or not. So stick around for that. Also, don't forget, check out the Antifada, patreon.com/the Antifada. Jamie's got new shows. And Matt, what's happened on TMBS last night?
Gene Bajalan joined us. We talked about, this infighting among between the Dems and the centrists, or the left and the centrists, and how we should embrace it and, get amongst it. We also talked about a common sense group of Tory MPs in London who are coming together to fight the cultural Marxism of the bourgeois liberals in the UK, and wanting to do things like, say, Winston Churchill's estate had some connection to slavery. So it's interesting. Sort of contours of the future PC arguments, I think we kind of seen across the Atlantic. So check that out last night. Patreon.com/TMBS and the Micro Brooks Show on YouTube.
All right. We will see you in the fun half. Emma will be joining us there. See you 646-257-3920.
In for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ the Anarchy song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense. Hey, folks, reminder. I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are...
Psych. Fuck them. Fuck them. Almost says what?
What?
Almost says what? Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black Africans. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck them. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We're back. Fun half. What Brendan just sent me. It took me the whole time to figure out what that was, but apparently on eBay they're raising money for charity for vets on Veterans Day, and you can get a Zoom call with all sorts of celebrities on there. I wasn't sure why you were sending me that at first. I didn't see the Tim Heidecker part, Brendan. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the fun half, as it were. Let's get right into some of the incredible level of desperation that is going on to try and, I don't know. I think the fraud thing is both. I think it's ultimately for Donald Trump to go out there and say that he didn't really lose the election, which seemed to be important to him. Even when he won the election in 2016, he was still going around saying that there was fraud. This time, because he's actually going to be leaving the White House, he may have to even do double duty. And here is Laura Ingraham hosting an anonymous Nevada postal worker. I want to make it clear.
Poll worker.
Poll worker. What did I say?
Postal.
Oh, poll worker. Sorry. Yes. There was a postal worker, we should say, who had originally signed an affidavit saying that they had seen some shenanigans and they recanted. This was a Project Veritas project, and that fell flat on its face. They will pay no price for that whatsoever.
Now they care about shenanigans with the mail.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, of course. Here is, though, Laura Ingraham hosting an anonymous Nevada poll worker. And I should tell you right now, it is not Elmo. It's going to sound like Elmo, but it's not.
The Trump campaign has submitted explosive evidence of voter fraud to the DOJ in the form of a sworn affidavit from a poll worker in Clark County, Nevada. Now, that poll worker joins me now exclusively with the shocking details. Now, we're going to be concealing her identity, even disguising her voice over her own safety concerns. Thank you for joining us. You saw something suspicious. We're going to get right into it tonight. Happening on the side of a Biden-Harris van in the parking lot of the polling station. Now, walk the audience through what happened.
I went out to go for a walk on my break, and I probably had a 150, 175 foot stretch where I was walking. The Biden van was parked along this stretch, and I was walking to it. So about 150 feet, I was walking, and I could see these people hand over what appeared to be white envelopes, just hand over onto this table. And as I got closer, the envelopes were being torn open. There were two people dropping the envelopes and two people ripping them open and turning and facing the van and drawing on them or marking them. And as I got closer, as I was walking, they would put things down and pick more paper up and mark on the van and then put it down and pick some more up. And as I got closer, I thought, those are ballots. And I didn't, I was in my polling uniform, basically. And as I walked by, I looked and I thought, those are ballots. And it kind of was an odd, like, what are they doing? There were 4 total people, but only 2 were marking and opening the envelopes and the paper. And as it took about a 6-minute walk to walk this parking lot, and I did it. I just walked my entire lunch hour. And so I came around a second time, and they're still opening and marking the ballots.
But you didn't say anything? You didn't say anything when you first saw it? I mean, how close were you to be able to see a ballot?
Well, as I was walking towards them, I was,
Yeah, she didn't say anything because she sounds like a minion from one of those cartoon movies. And so no one was going to take her seriously no matter what.
Now, yeah, if you just describe walking around in that voice, it sounds vaguely suspicious. But
here's the thing, and I this is one of the things you learn day one at the George Soros election fraud camp. Do not fill out all the fake ballots on the day of the election with a Biden-Harris van, or use an unmarked van. And don't do it out in the open near the elections place. You do it in the special hideout that Soros has paid for.
They would have totally failed the Clinton voter fraud seminar. I mean, I passed with flying colors, but I don't know. They seem like bad students to me.
Now,
that's not how my people do it.
For those of you who are cynical about this, just because we now know that the postal worker that was on Project Veritas lied and has recanted, you should also know that the administration apparently has not submitted it. Maybe they've submitted it to the DOJ, but remember, this is a state violation. These are state poll workers. They have not received a formal claim. Or I should say the Nevada AG's office has not received any type of affidavit or any type of claim about this. In other words, it sounds a lot like they didn't have time to report it because the poll worker had to go on television to talk about it. I'm sure they'll get around to it because this is urgent.
We're now seeing this with multiple of these Trump voter fraud claims. They're like, I had to prioritize coming on cable news before actually submitting this legal battle, going into this legal battle about voter fraud that I say is so important.
Well, it could be very re-traumatizing to report voter fraud.
Right. They don't want to get triggered.
And one of the problems with also submitting it to law enforcement is that you're sort of heavily invested at that point. You can go on Fox News and say anything, particularly when you're shrouded in a shadow and with a fake voice thing.
They asked her what disguises she wanted, and she just says all of them. Like that was like the
everything, everything. Now, here's what happens though when you actually engage in the legal process. Put up this image. This is an exchange between a Pennsylvania judge and a Trump campaign attorney. This is from the Montgomery County Board of Election vote count. Put this up. This is number 6. The court. I understand. I'm asking you a specific question, and I am looking for a specific answer. Are you claiming that there is any fraud in connection with these 592 disputed ballots? Mr. Goldstein, who is the one of the attorneys for the campaign. To my knowledge, at present, no. The court. Are you claiming that there is any undue or improper influence upon the elector with respect to these 592 ballots? The lawyer, to my knowledge, at present, no. In other words, we're not making any claims about this. We're just saying there's something going on here, Your Honor. Like, what the heck? But if you're asking us if it has anything to do with the outcome of the election or fraud or anything like that, no. The answer is no. But we maybe later we'll know something different.
Yeah, I mean, it almost doesn't need to be said, but the New York Times did journalism on this, and they spoke to most heads of polling stations and officials in the states, and most of them responded and said, no, we didn't see anything like this. So, you know, of course, Fox isn't going to have those folks on, people who actually know what's going on. They're there to kind of fan the flames of what Trump is claiming here when he's teetering on the brink anyway. I mean, Pompeo was almost tongue in cheek when he said we're preparing for a second Trump administration. It would be like amusing if the consequences weren't so dire.
The amazing thing is how little of a price that any of them are going to pay for this.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody's just sort of like, well, we've got to let them, you know, I mean, honestly, they have the same attitude towards these grown-ups on Fox and these grown-ups in the administration and these grown-ups in the Senate and the House and whatnot, as I do with my 7-year-old, which is like, I'm just going to let him have a temper tantrum and let it wear out. But in the meantime, it's not like, hey, we've got another 7-year-old who is trying to maybe help the country deal with a pandemic, let's say, or to ramp up their administration. I mean, it is not an equivalent situation. Our behavior should not be in the same way that you sort of overlook a temper tantrum of a 7-year-old who didn't, you know, whatever, didn't get the Lego set he wanted, with all due respect to my son.
Well, hopefully these folks can go hang out with Guaido and that Anya's lady and make a support group for people who failed at doing a coup.
Yeah, I mean, Pompeo's at least consistent, or the Trump administration's at least consistent, right? You know, they recognize Guaido as the leader, they delegitimize the Bolivian election results, and now they're saying that Trump is the true leader of the country. So they really do have a consistent track record. You have to give them credit for backing illegitimate leaders and claiming they're legitimate.
People probably saw Mike Pompeo make a comment like you were alluding to yesterday. He was asked, or maybe it was 2 days ago, he was asked about, do you feel that the fact that the government service administration is not signing off resources to the Biden administration is going to inhibit their ability to set up and maintain decent relations with other countries? And Mike Pompeo, joking around, apparently, said, the transition to the second Trump administration will be smooth. Now, I mean, he's joking around, of course, and as if it is a joke that, we have a lot of time to spare to get this new administration going in the midst of a pandemic. But there's also a quality of all of this that is like, it's like, I don't actually believe what we're seeing is a coup, but it's also sort of like where you see like your buddy is drunk and he's on the roof of your garage and he's pretending like he's going to jump off, but he's so drunk, there's also a good chance that he's just going to slip and fall off. That's sort of where I feel like we're at. Like if there was any opportunity for Trump to actually stay in office, and it wasn't so obvious that he was, beat and there was like some wiggle room for Pennsylvania, then I don't know. But here's Joe Biden responding to Mike Pompeo.
There is no evidence of any of the assertions made by the president or Secretary of State Pompeo. Secretary of State Pompeo.
Yeah, I mean, well, two things. One, it's almost like he's kind of being a trailblazer, Trump is, and his whole team for a potentially real coup. Like he's showing them, this is how you do it. We're just going to lay it out and then potentially, I mean, it's funny, but it's like they're showing how flimsy all of this is. And then my second point is credit where it's due. Biden's playing this the right way. He's not giving any life to it. He's laughing it off. He's in the power position here, and he's treating them like the clowns that they are. If he was getting all outraged by it, which I feel like if I was in his position, I might be, which is why I'm not in his position, then you would be giving legitimacy to it and acting emotionally and allowing his supporters to maybe cling on to it more than they do.
Yeah, I think basically treating them like they're pathetic is actually a good look for Biden here. But I totally agree. I think Tom Cotton is sitting down. He's just taking notes. I mean, and like Ryan Grimm said at in the first half of the program, anybody coming up through the ranks of the Republican Party is basically being, there's a lot of modeling going on here for them, and this is what has been going on, frankly, for the past 20, 25, 30 years with the Republicans. You get Newt Gingrich, who pulls a version of this, essentially, and each successive generation of Republicans becomes more like this. And here's Matt Gaetz. Here's a perfect example. This guy who was, he got his modeling from Joe Scarborough, who was part of that Newt Gingrich generation.
And now he's hashtag resistance.
Now he's hashtag resistance, but he has to do that for television. But here is the guy who literally followed him in that district, not successively, directly, but in the same district. Here is Matt Gaetz talking about, praising Project Veritas on a day when their whole story just literally fell apart.
If that is in fact the case, but Steve, we've also learned how hard fraud is to catch after the fact. If there is a lesson for Republicans here, we have to be far more aggressive as these ballots are coming in, because by now the ballots have been separated from the envelopes, and it's very difficult to do the ex post facto authentication work that I think would give people confidence in the outcome of the election. And so I think we've got to be more diligent. Look, how is it that Project Veritas and the National Pulse and these relatively small media organizations are turning up more evidence than the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice? That's our failure. We didn't get out there and do the work on the front end to ensure that we weren't in this position, because Donald Trump did everything he had to do to motivate 71 million Americans to vote for him legally.
That's exactly right. And
all of Trump's votes, incidentally, were perfectly legal, but it's the other, 80 million or so that were the illegal ones. How does Project Veritas do it? Well, it turns out maybe they just offer people the opportunity to make a lot of money. Washington Post reports that a Pennsylvania postal worker whose claims have been cited by top Republicans as potential evidence of widespread voting irregularities admitted to U.S. Postal Service investigators that he fabricated the allegations. This is according to 3 officials briefed on the investigation and a statement from the House Congressional Committee.
They literally just did it in Minnesota. They just did it. They just tried to pay that guy.
Well, the Project Veritas set up apparently a GoFundMe for this guy. They are the ones who interviewed him, and they were first aired, his allegations, this guy Hopkins, by Project Veritas. Hopkins agreed to attach his name to the allegations late last week. He was instantly celebrated by Trump supporters. A GoFundMe page created under Hopkins' name raised more than $136,000, with donors praising him as a patriot and whistleblower. However, sadly, the fundraising page was removed by GoFundMe when it turns out the guy lied. Yes, that is a sad way to go down. But, and this is good, folks, if you're looking to make a quick buck, Project Veritas offering $25,000 for firsthand election fraud tips in Pennsylvania. That was announced just yesterday. Also, of course, Governor Dan Patrick, or I should say Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick in Texas, is offering $1 million. Wow. $1 million.
Yeah, so, this is not how journalistic organizations usually behave, by the way, offering rewards for information. But sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
Hold on. Let me see if I can practice something here. Hold on for 1 second. Is there any way I can? Oh, I can't shut down all those lights. Sorry. Okay, I was going to try and get shrouded in darkness. Where's my $1 million? Where's my $1 million?
Where's my $1 million? $1 million.
Can we play
Such a good number.
Can we play a clip of the?
Those movies are so good.
The knockoff version of that Laura Ingraham interview. Do we have it? You already have it.
Thank you for joining us. You saw something suspicious. We're going to get right into it tonight. Happening on the side of a Biden-Harris van in the parking lot of the polling station. Now, walk the audience through what happened.
I'm not going to say which party does it, but thousands of votes are gathered and they come in and they're dumped in a location, and then all of a sudden you lose elections that you think you're going to win. And I'm not going to stand for it. Our voting system, first of all, we should have voter ID. When you vote, you should have voter ID.
Oh, my God.
And if you send something
so
in,
good.
you should be sure, as a state and as a country,
All right,
you
we're
should
good.
be sure.
We don't need this anymore. Who was that? We just point people to that version of it because it's so funny.
Yeah, it's like when Trump used to call in as his, what was the name of his fake
John Miller.
PR
John
guy?
Miller.
John Miller. Not creative at all with the name. I would have gone a little more exotic.
Yeah, who was that? That was Nick
Lutsko.
Yeah, at
Very
Nick
funny.
Nick Lutsko.
Yeah, he
also
does
did
those musical kind of parodies too, right? That guy's really funny.
Yeah, he did
Van
a super.
Bongino one.
He did a super funny Bongino video about the RNC that people
Yeah.
should look.
It's still stuck in my head. It's like a good song.
Yeah, it's literally stuck in my head. I haven't had a song stuck in my head for a while, but I literally want to listen to it right now.
Yeah.
Related to all this, I just hope now that they know how annoying it is when someone tries to coup, the democratic results of an election, I'm sure the Democrats will never support a coup in Latin America again.
Let's hope. Let's hope. I would not invest a lot in that.
Well, I just didn't know. Like, it's really annoying. It turns
Yeah.
out it's so annoying.
It's
But
stressful.
Bet the over on coups supported by the Democrats in the next 5 years.
But here's the thing that is, I mean, I that's well taken. It's not going to happen. I mean, we're still going to get the foreign policy establishment is going to, I think, under more than likely, I would say, under both Democrats and Republicans are going to support the sort of like overarching corporate, the corporate incentives to get rid of leaders of countries who stand in the way, perhaps, of these corporations profiting. I mean, I think that is, it's going to be a rare opportunity that we get a politician who's going to who's going to in any way try and inhibit that. I think Sanders may have been one of, certainly in my lifetime, the closest to a politician who had a chance of winning anything, frankly. To do
Kissinger has said that Biden had good people around him throughout the campaign. So,
of course.
Yikes.
No, I mean, it's not even in play. I mean, we saw Guaido in Congress getting applauded, but so, I mean, I think that is a reality, but I want to just play this clip from Sauger and Crystal Ball, because, one of the things that seems to be happening here, it's like, on one hand, I don't think that there's going to be a coup, but I've had a lot of people who keep texting me like, is this, what's going on here? Like, why is he firing all the civilian leadership in the Pentagon? I'm sure, someone in there is, like, we talked to Ryan Grimm about this. Part of it is probably just his ego. Part of it is, punishment. Part of it is to make it more difficult for Biden to put people in. I mean, make no mistake, these people who are going in there, I mean, they were rabidly Muslim, and one of the guys, was convinced that Barack Obama was a Muslim. I mean, there's no upgrade, let's put it this way, with these people in terms of like a progressive agenda. It's a weird thing that he's doing. There's no doubt about it. We have not been down the road of a successful coup in this country, at least in terms of like a more traditional version of one. Some people argue that 2000 was, but the idea that there are like people out there who are sort of like poo-pooing normal reaction by people, because we do have, maybe it's not 70 million, maybe it's only 30 million or 40 million people, but there is a significant portion of the country who is convinced that all of this like kabuki is real. And that's not a healthy thing, regardless of it. And like the idea that there would be some type of outrage that Bill Barr is writing a memo that does change policy for the DOJ in some respect, which is like, we're going to loosen our rules about interfering with elections in the course of them being counted, right? I mean, well, the policy has been for the DOJ that you do not do anything with an investigation that could impact the outcome of an election. Bill Barr sent a memo which could be read any number of ways. One could be like, you can't do this unless it's serious. I don't want any spurious accusations. But he's also saying that, but if you do find something about the election, you can pursue it, even though it would impact the outcome of an election. Now, it was enough for the person in charge of the criminal election division to quit publicly.
Right. So it's not the more innocuous one that you're suggesting. I mean, it's clearly not.
Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But like, there's only, like, unless you're in the DOJ and you know what Bill Barr is thinking, this is a pretty good signal that maybe there's a problem with this. Other people are saying no, but there was other people going like, Bill Barr is, he's not one of the crazy ones.
Well, those people are naive because they are a part of the very establishment that from the outside we're critiquing. So it's almost a disbelief because they can't understand why they would be a part of such an organization.
But here is Sagar once again doing the exact same thing he did with the post office. When we know we had federal judges going in there up until the day of the election saying, hey, wait a second, you guys are not even following the consent decree or the court orders that I have issued. But here they are again, basically saying you're a sucker if you're taking any of this even remotely seriously.
No sooner did I finish writing this radar that a memo went out from Bill Barr that everybody freaked out about. Oh my, he's directing them to investigate election fraud and there's no proof, et cetera. And I mean, look, obviously he's trying to mess around to please Trump, but you go and read the memo and all it says is if there is election fraud, you can investigate it. That's it. There's no like directing anyone to do anything. It's just like, hey, if there's election fraud, you can investigate it.
Well, what's wrong with that? I mean, don't you welcome an investigation? Like, I'm sorry. Look, they don't just make up facts, or I mean, maybe they used to, but if they do, we'll certainly call it out here. Yeah. It actually won't be that difficult in order to disprove.
Pause it for a second. They don't just make up facts. Does anybody remember the national story about the 9 votes that were found in a backroom office at a post office? 9 votes that the Department of Justice was involved in. We have a Supreme Court that is saying that federal courts cannot intervene whatsoever in protecting the right to vote, except for a legislator, that in any way supersedes the legislatures of states. Yet the Department of Justice can go and make a national story about 9 votes that ostensibly is some type of plan to steal the election from Donald Trump, because 5 of those votes were Donald Trump and 4 were for Biden. Those are the people who were supposed to sort of like say are reasonable. And just even opening up with the words like, Bill Barr is probably playing around to placate the president who won't concede that the election's over. Hey, that's a problem. Like the Department of Justice, if like the Department of Justice can be used in that manner, that's a problem. I don't think that if we were able to put that show reporting on Bill Clinton running into the attorney general at an airport and talking to her, Loretta Lynch, for 25 minutes about according to what we heard, it was all about getting Hillary off for her emails or whatever. That was a story that had that was in the ether for months. So, I mean, like, I understand they're truth tellers over there. It's just like, which truths are you deciding to tell? Continue.
I mean, can I just say, like, this don't you want an investigation thing? Can we just tease that out a bit? Don't you want the DOJ to get involved with the election results? That's what he's saying there.
They have a policy of not doing that.
And imagine putting that in the context of, say, Lula. Hey, Lula, don't you want an investigation? Right? It's blatant what this is. And it's the exact same thing as the Russiagate 2.0 Postal Service thing, where they didn't mention, like, the overtime stuff, for instance. Major oversights in that clip, and they never revisit that a single time from that clip to the election day.
In fact, I don't want the DOJ to investigate that. That should not be the first place it goes. It should be going to the state attorney general. But continue.
Yeah, he's taking it as a given, too, that voter fraud is a real widespread problem that needs to be investigated, which it's not.
Yeah. I mean, we also have the example of, frankly, in 2005, maybe it was 2004, when the Bush administration, Karl Rove, ended up firing a bunch of U.S. attorneys because they weren't coming up with voter fraud.
Sagar's a right winger, so I just am like, I'm not necessarily shocked by it, but it's just, I feel like people are just discovering that he's on the right. That's, I think, what is the bigger takeaway here.
Yeah, he was created in a lab to be the most palatable fascist possible for a general audience.
Let's continue to play this.
Certainly call it out here. Yeah. Actually, won't be that difficult in order to disprove if they release some report. And this is the part which is driving me crazy about all of this, which is that the truth is that these people, the media and so much more, after Russiagate, after Hillary, after fake news, after Russian disinformation, etc., they have no bearing to tell anybody not to question an election or others. And do they have any idea why 70% of Republicans don't trust the election results and don't trust them whenever they're trying to walk them through everything that happened? They just want you to sit down and shut up and accept results. And look, I don't accept the fact that there was like massive, widespread electoral fraud. But I think there was probably some fraud, as there always is in an election. And if we want to uncover that, and if we go and we find that in a DOJ report or something, fine by me. Isn't that a better thing? That would actually help a lot of people accept the results of the election. And yet they just don't want to go down this road.
Wait,
and
hold
it
on.
speaks to something
Can you pause it for a
second?
The point here, though, Sagar, is that you guys are anti-establishment, not ostensibly. I mean, I believe Crystal is authentic in her perspective, and I like a lot of what she has to say. But like, if you're claiming to be kind of anti-establishment for the Republican Party and mistrustful of power, why would you believe that the DOJ would come up with this completely pristine result?
Yeah, I mean, or why would you tell people to just trust that the Postal Service changes are about longstanding efficiency
and if you're worried about the ongoing fraud that exists in elections, then where were you on the multiple bills on election protection that were rejected by a Republican Senate over just months ago? Like, honestly, like, we should have wholesale voter protections without a doubt. And there is one party that has consistently promoted that. And there is one party that has consistently blocked it. Period. End of story. I mean, if we're going to pretend that, and if this is all, if we're going to have the DOJ involved in elections in states across the country as a mechanism to let the 70 million people down easy, do we get that every year? I mean, do we get that? Do we get that for every election? Are we all going to be, having our hands held? It sucks when you lose an election. I'm not even that happy about winning this one in the way that we did. I wanted to win more.
I know, right?
Where's my pacifier? Where's my, do I get like can I get the Iowa Attorney General to come and hold my hand while I deal with the fact that Joni Ernst is still a senator? What about the Maine AG? Can the Maine AG call me and soothe me when I go to sleep so that we don't have Susan Collins in the Senate? It's ridiculous. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah. Well, they're feeding into a situation that's actually pretty good for the Republicans, right? Because they have this angry, activated base that thinks the election was stolen from them. And at the same time, they still hold quite a bit of power in the courts and the Senate. So
right. So you can be the establishment while having galvanized the kind of anger and more populist rhetoric that you're talking about, Jamie. That's a great point.
And we just got an IM reminding me of the Chris Kobach commission that was thrown together to prove that Donald Trump didn't lose the election by 3 million votes. I mean, give me a break, honestly. Like, you cannot be there and say, like, we're about telling the truth and demanding the truth. And it's okay if there's this entire fiction that is going on for weeks involving every top member of the Republican leadership and people who have all their hands on the mechanisms of power in this country, basically saying, hey, let's just believe this fiction for a while. There is a Santa Claus, so maybe it'll make you feel better.
I mean, if Chris Kobach even turned up a little bit of voter fraud, it would help a lot of people, Sam. So
just a little bit. Everybody
just a taste.
Feel much better about that.
A micro dose of voter fraud, and then the country's healed.
It's a clown show.
Keeps you happy. Did you guys see that article about actual voter fraud that happened with this group of Hasidic Jews and developers in a town upstate? You know what I'm talking about? It's pretty interesting.
Recently?
Yeah.
This election?
Sam Adler-Bell wrote a story about it for Jewish Currents. It was interesting on a number of levels, but I think one thing that it shows is that it's actually pretty obvious when voter fraud is happening, even on a very local level. And it's pretty easy for local officials to investigate it and figure out what happened.
It's all the undocumented immigrants coming in to swing an election, particularly for the local elections.
Disguised as a Hasidic Jewish community.
Exactly. Well, they go in and then
deep undercover.
Deep cover. They are so invested in who's going to be the county comptroller that they're willing to risk being deported.
Pretty much.
Hey, can I just share something real quick before we go to the phones? This is that meme, how it started and how it's going.
Yeah. So
this is this Amanda Duchette on Twitter. She doesn't have a whole lot of followers, but I wanted to share this one because it is pretty funny. It's a truck here in the first one, how it started. Trump train on the side and washed off now. So.
Oh, sad.
Sorry to hear about that.
I'd be curious to see if people are noticing any of that. Because I saw a poll that said only 3% of people think Trump won the election at this point, which means that Q is not doing the job that we'd want it to do, really.
Q is
and also the point too about like the incentive that Sam made earlier to actually do voter fraud. There's no financial incentive. In fact, there's about an exponentially larger financial incentive, as we saw with Project Veritas, to claim there's voter fraud without there being voter fraud. So seeing voter fraud or pretending to see it is infinitely more lucrative and incentivized than actually doing it.
Without a doubt. Let's go to the phones. Calling from an 801 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Kyle from Salt Lake City, downtown COVID USA right now.
How are you guys doing there? Your governor has required a mask mandate throughout the state, my understanding, and that he said you're about 2 weeks away from basically the ICU being overrun.
Yeah, so a bit about that. The background there is that our governor, Governor Herbert, his last term is right now. He's technically in his lame duck, and our new governor is going to be his lieutenant governor, Spencer Cox. And Spencer Cox was put in charge of the coronavirus task force at the beginning of the year, and basically got that fake job to beat John Huntsman Jr. in the primary. And then as soon as the primary was over, he kind of disappeared. They stopped having the task force meeting. We've kind of just been on our own with very little control at all for the last few months. The last time we talked, I talked about the issue that we were having with schools and teachers not having PPE or anything like that. So it's been kind of like pretty chaotic. And so these most recent restrictions, he did announce a statewide mask mandate finally, but he also put a ban on social gatherings, or what they're referring to as social gatherings. So you're not supposed to go to anyone else's house. But the problem is that they're completely not doing any restrictions when it comes to churches, bars, restaurants, gyms, pools, or anything like that. So I can't go visit my grandma at her house, but if I wanted to go to church or to a bar with my grandmother, I could do that. So, and all schools are open to, like, most kids are in school, including high school and junior high as well. And colleges have been in person as well. And I think they're planning on not having kids come back
After Thanksgiving.
After Thanksgiving. Yeah. So, and like we are taking in like the most populous area, like close to Salt Lake City, is taking in patients from all over the state and more rural areas that don't have as much hospital capacity. So in like Salt Lake, we are completely like, we're pretty filled up, and we've been hitting records on daily new COVID cases almost every single day for like a month and a half now. And it took, I don't know why they waited till, this last Sunday to announce anything else. It's weird to think that it was related to the election the previous Tuesday, because I mean, Utah's weird because we have this like segment of the like respectable Republicans, like Mitt Romney thinks of himself as like
Huntsman,
the Maverick 2.0 type of thing. So we have this weird balance of these Republicans, and like Governor Herbert and the new governor, Governor Cox, are very much of that same vein, where they are like the good kind of Republicans. They don't see themselves as being Trump Republicans, but they support the exact same policies, and we're seeing that right now. We're seeing the result of what that type of governance does, regardless if they have the same rhetoric, because it's insane here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's just a new report that came out that basically said restaurants are, that's the last thing that you want to have open, that they need to be down to maybe 20% capacity max. But
exactly.
even then,
how do you protect the people who work there as well? And like people are eating, they obviously don't have their masks on. So I have friends who work in restaurants and bars who have gotten COVID. And then like another thing that we don't talk about as much, I mean, like we've always talked about like with our staff every day, they talk about the number of beds available and the number of ventilators available, but they never talk about the number of like nurses and doctors who have to come in and treat these patients who are putting themselves
in North Dakota now. They are. I mean, this is going to be, and particularly out west, there is already a pre-existing shortage of hospital workers, and in North Dakota, it's gotten so bad that if you are COVID positive and are asymptomatic, you can come in and work as long as you're only working with people who are already infected. So, I mean, that's how desperate they are for nurses in North Dakota. And here's the terrifying part about all of this. You're at the point where you're at in Salt Lake City, in Utah, in North Dakota. It's growing in certain places in Texas and whatnot. And there doesn't seem to be any response. Like in New York, we got to this point, we were actually like a week or two out, maybe 3 or 4 weeks out from where it peaked in New York when everything shut down. So you still have like a 4-week lag. And so we're not even at the point where we're watching state governments react to what is from where they are 4 weeks from now. So like when we're talking about 130,000 infections a day now, and we're at, what is it, almost 70,000 hospitalized around the country. If tomorrow half the country shut down, you're still going to get 4 weeks of it continuing to rise, because it's a lagging indicator, the hospitalizations. And we're not even at that point. And people are going to go to Thanksgiving, and it's a real problem. I mean, people know it's
going to be super bad, but this is specifically for like a circuit breaker until Thanksgiving. But like, I mean, like they're trying to put the majority of the blame right now on what they're calling, household transmission or social gatherings, but like that's not really taking into account where people are getting this, because kids are still going to school, people are still going to restaurants. So like, yes, we're getting a lot of like, if people, I mean, in Utah, we have a lot of big families. So like if somebody lives with, 5 or 6 other people, all of them might get it. And obviously that's a big, like you're transmitting it to 5 other people in your household, but where are these people getting it? Within their household. If they're not going to touch anywhere else, then this is going to keep happening.
It puts the blame on individuals.
Be a disaster.
Sorry. Yeah, no, it puts the blame on individuals and their own choices independent of business and the economy, which is the primary goal, so that
Kyle,
you can make it about what people decide to do and not get in the way of money making.
Appreciate the call, Kyle.
I was going to say, I'd say we should have New Yorkers go there in hazmat suits and tell the people, dude, it was so bad. It was so bad in New York. But again, that's still not going to do that much unless we enshrine it on the level of policy.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to say we're going to send our kids to school, particularly like elementary school kids, but there's a solution to people going out to eat, and which is you don't go out to eat, you pay the restaurant as a government and you pay the workers as a government, and people order takeout. Or, like,
how about this? Pay the restaurant to bring people free food.
Right. I mean, there's a multitude of ways.
They did this in Germany, I believe, where they wage replaced for, I think, and they're not even led by some lefty, but like they wage replaced for, I think, 70% of wages in the first few weeks or months of the pandemic, and it avoided a lot of economic hardship. And I mean, the idea that the United States would even consider doing that is, unthinkable.
We just, as we were speaking, New York State, because obviously there's a higher sensitivity to this thing getting out of control. Cuomo announces that starting Friday, bars and restaurants with liquor licenses must close at 10 p.m. Gyms must close at 10 p.m. I'm not 100% sure what the theory is here, but I guess it's just sort of like you don't want the bar, you want to allow them to make a little bit of money, but people are getting too wasted after 10 p.m.
Right. And everyone gets drunk at the gym too, right? Like that's what I do at the gym.
People get wasted before 10 p.m. as well. I don't know if they think COVID is more transmissible after that, but
I mean, I don't know what the theory is there. It doesn't make sense to me.
9 p.m. curfew in New Jersey too.
You pay people to stay closed. You pay people to not go to work. That's what you do.
Yeah, well, maybe having a good economy here in New York City is not the first thing on Cuomo's mind. I know it's shocking, but think about what happens when businesses fail. I feel like his real estate speculator friends will make money.
You mean like swooping in and buying up distressed properties?
Yeah.
Yeah, private equity is going to have a field day. Field day.
Calling from a 505 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Gosh. Damn. Honestly, I would wait to see how long this could go on if it wasn't for the fact that we were doing a show. But
what is it, Kermit? There was voter fraud by the old mill?
Exactly. Calling from a 973 area code.
Hey, is this me?
It is. I'm almost disappointed you're not a frog.
Oh, no, sorry. This is Ark from North Jersey.
Ark from North Jersey. What's on your mind?
So I called in to talk about the DCC, or DCCC.
Okay.
So, we were talking about Robbie Mook last week. Sherry Bustos, the executive director, she's resigning or she's not seeking reappointment, I guess.
Correct.
But did you mention that, so in 2018, she won her race by 25 points. And this year, she won her race by 4 points.
Right.
So I don't know exactly what happened there. I don't live in her district, but
well, that was the
something
story
happened
across
there.
the. Well, I mean, what happened there was in my estimation, and I think we're still probably like a couple of months off, to be honest with you, in terms of getting like the actual better data. But my guess is that in 2018, we had a very motivated anti-Trump vote that did not have Donald Trump to vote against. So they took it out on Republicans. And then Democrats got into power. And because they didn't go after Republicans and because they didn't take all of the opportunities they had to tie Donald Trump to the Republicans, a race where you had the top of the ticket saying, this is about Donald Trump, but, we need good Republicans, a race where you had the most prominent Democrat in the country say almost the identical thing, then people just actually took the cues and said, okay, we'll vote against Donald Trump. And then I'm more inclined to vote for the Republican. I mean, that's the most, if we have the top Democrats running for office saying that, what other explanation do you need as to why people split their ticket?
So I also was looking into the other staffers of the DCCC because I just wanted to see what sort of.
Well, Robbie Mook, to be clear, Robbie Mook was running an outside expenditure PAC. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it had millions of dollars. And that guy, honestly, what's it take to not get rehired in that world? How many times can you fail?
Biden chief of staff next.
Abject failure. Yeah, exactly.
Failing upwards. I mean, how did he get the job at House Majority PAC, which is one of the most influential Democratic PACs to begin with after 2016? I mean, yeah, that's infuriating.
Well, go ahead.
But so the executive director, Allison Jaslow, is where do you think she was working before this?
I mean, I would imagine she was working either on the Clinton campaign or maybe for Claire McCaskill. I'm trying to think of
she's Sherry Bustos' former chief of staff.
Oh, all right. Well, there you go. I mean,
and the deputy executive director, he actually has a pretty good resume. He managed the Nevada Senate race in 2018, which they won. But he got married in August. You may remember this. Because his wedding was officiated by a certain Supreme Court justice.
Ah, okay.
And so, yeah, these are the people staffing the DCCC.
Yeah, not great. I mean, not great. And I'm obviously understating it. It's a real problem. No, I know it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but what that officiated it. But I mean, I'm not sure what's relevant about that necessarily. But yeah,
They think she got sick and died because of that wedding. At least that was the reporting I was seeing.
What?
Well, I mean, she was struggling with. I think at the time, people speculated right after she died that it might have had to do with that. But I don't think it was COVID related. Still, the look of this very elderly and important member of the Supreme Court officiating a wedding at some Democratic operative's home or whatever. Stop having these big weddings in your backyard during COVID. But if you're a part of the elite, it doesn't really matter.
Well, I would also say I mean, if it were me, I would have put her in a protective bubble. But if it were me, I also would have said, hey, look, I understand you have personal feelings about who you want to replace you and this and that, but better safe than sorry. And but
yeah,
appreciate the call.
Thanks for taking my call. Welcome, Emma.
I wouldn't tell my grandma to go to a wedding right now, and millions of people's rights don't rest on her being alive.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, not great.
Let's go to the IM. IM's here. Some of the stuff from these court cases is pretty funny. Oh wait, I do want to play this. So this case that was in front of the Supreme Court, hearing oral arguments yesterday, brought by, I think it's 16 attorney generals, Republican states across the country, joined in by the Department of Justice. So the federal government is actually arguing against a federal law in this instance. What had happened, as you know, the Republicans were able to vote down the tax penalty for the individual mandate. In retrospect, it turns out the individual mandate, not that important. People want to have health insurance. And even if it's, more expensive than they want it to be, they will sign up for health insurance because most people are not idiots. They realize they are potentially can get sick. And if they can afford it, they will go in and buy it. Obviously, if you can't buy the health insurance, you can't buy it. But you wouldn't have a tax penalty, I don't think. I'm not sure about that. But I mean, if you're eligible for subsidies, then you're eligible for subsidies. But if you're not eligible for subsidies at that point, then you would get dinged with the tax penalty. But nevertheless, the mandate was rolled back. It didn't sink the insurance like people thought it might, because you need to have an extended risk pool. But Congress made this decision to allow the law to stand and to strike down the tax penalty. These attorney generals were bringing the case to the Supreme Court, arguing that if an unfunded tax is unconstitutional, and if that element of the bill is unconstitutional or just inoperative, then the whole bill, the whole policy, the whole program should be deemed to be equally unconstitutional, though, because their argument is it's not severable. But of course, Congress has said it is severable. That's why we did that. And so they did it. And so here is John Roberts making that very point in the oral arguments yesterday.
Dismantle the entire law, which could leave
and leave the rest of the act in place.
It's hard for you to argue that Congress intended the entire act to fall if the mandate were struck down when the same Congress that lowered the penalty to zero did not even try to repeal the rest of the act.
So there it is. I mean, that's the basic dynamic, and that's good that Roberts is recognizing that. Now, of course, when the Voting Rights Act came up in front of that same court, a bunch of them were perfectly fine saying, well, it's true that the Senate reauthorized this. It's true that the House reauthorized this, but they did that because they were afraid of being called racist. And so we're going to come and save them for that.
The textualists, they interpreted that's what Congress was feeling about being called racist there. And also Brett Kavanaugh has been signaling that while he's totally okay with the mandate being struck down, interested what he thinks about a mandate for having auto insurance when you drive a car, but whatever. He seems to be indicating that he's going to uphold the ACA, which is remarkable because I was quite worried that with Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court that the ACA would be done with. But I mean, this goes back to the fact that this is a Heritage Foundation plan at its outset, and conservatives, despite railing against Obamacare on the stump, don't necessarily have that much of a problem with this healthcare plan because it's fairly right wing. And the justices are behaving politically, even though they pretend not to be.
I think that's what it is.
It's weird to me how many questions are so unsettled at this very late date. You know, like you'd think that we would know by now for sure in 2020 if you could strike down part of a law or if that invalidates the whole thing. But apparently not.
Well, with this court, there's going to be a tremendous amount of upheaval in regards to precedents like that. And we're going to see it, more often. The places that we're really going to see it are in like the delegation authority of lawmakers to basically say, we don't know what constitutes clean air or what possible things that we need to outlaw to get clean air. So we're going to pass
it's not
a
our
Clean Air
place.
Act.
It's not our place in the Constitution to say what's clean air, what's clean water.
Well, no. But the point is that the Congress doesn't have the ability to do it. Like, you'd have to be a scientist. And so they're going to delegate that authority to the EPA. You're instructed to get us clean air. I'm being a little simplistic here, but this is basically it. You're instructed to get us clean air. We're not going to go through. We don't know if that means that there shouldn't be, X amount of mercury in the air versus Y amount of mercury. You figure that out with scientists. This Supreme Court is probably going to disallow that at one point. The Supreme Court's also going to probably reverse the Chevron doctrine, where courts have deference to the expertise. There's two different issues here that are similarly positioned with, like, the EPA or the USDA or the FDA or Bureau, the Labor Department. I mean, on and on and on. They're going to make major assaults on settled law that has been law for 70 years, 80 years in this country. And they're going to do that in the coming months, years. It's going to be a problem.
Cool system.
Well, I mean, the problem is that people disagree about stuff. And you got to make sure that the people who you disagree with on this stuff don't have the levers of power. Calling from a 256 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, good afternoon. This is Jacob from Alabama.
Jacob from the Valley Labor Report. What's happening?
That's right. I wanted to call because there were some really interesting results from the exit polling here in Alabama, and I understand that some of the early exit polls may not be super reliable, but I wanted to run some of those numbers by you and just kind of see what you thought about them, because they really, like, being in Alabama, they really surprised me.
All right, Jacob, will you just back off your phone just a little bit, and then yeah, please do.
Okay, sorry about that. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing that 71% of white men voted for Trump compared to 77% of white women. 54% of the youth vote under 29 voted for Trump. And this is one of the more shocking things. There was virtually no income differential between GOP versus Democratic ballots. The difference was overwhelmingly racial. And when I say there was, like, literally 1 percentage point difference between Democrat and Republican voting patterns when you look at incomes under $50,000 a year versus incomes over $150,000 a year. I mean, almost zero, like, statistically nothing. That was really wild to me. Jones lost by way more than was expected, even more than some of the local conservative talk show hosts. And even Tuberville campaign reps on those shows were saying that they were shooting for a 12 to 13 point win. Trump widened his margin in Alabama. Another really surprising thing was that Twinkle Kavanaugh, the president of the Public Service Commission, won her reelection with more votes than any non-presidential candidate in the state's history, despite the fact that she just objectively is bad at her job. Alabamians pay the highest utility bills in the country. The Democrat was running on cutting utility taxes, lowering utility bills, making the rate-setting process more open, and the Republicans still won, and by more votes than any non-presidential candidate in the state's history. The voting patterns in Alabama are almost entirely on social issues and kind of like not economics. And that's kind of underscored by interactions that I've had personally with other people here in Alabama. For instance, there was one person in 2016 that I was able to get to agree to every single economic policy that Bernie was pushing, but they would never have voted for a Democrat because of abortion and gay marriage. And, it's difficult for me, I don't know, it's difficult for me to kind of know what to do with that. And so, I've been having a segment every once a week on one of the local conservative talk shows, and they asked me, like, what is the game plan for Democrats in Alabama? How did Democrats in Alabama come back from the utter decimation, which is actually pretty recent? Democrats held both houses of our state legislature as recently as 2010, but since then they have just been destroyed. And so, you know, I have some thoughts on it, but I wondered, you know, what are your thoughts on those numbers, and what should Democrats do in these places where, you know, there is almost no economic concerns at the ballot box by most Alabamians, and you know, how do you get them to think about those things?
Well, let me just say that the 2010 thing doesn't surprise me. I keep going back to that interview that I did with, I think it was the author of Identity Crisis, and that statistic he told me that it wasn't until Obama's election in 2008 where 50% of non-college educated whites were under the impression at that time that the Republican Party was to the left of the Democrats on race. And I think, you know, particularly in a place like Alabama, the Democrats were associated since the 1800s with being the more racist party. And and that lasted up until, you know, 1965, and Johnson said we're going to lose the South for a generation, and he was off by like 3 generations, I think. And I think that, like, that's why I think you could still see people were in that habit of voting for Democrats in southern states, because it wasn't, I don't think that they had a sense of what the national party was in the way that they did after Obama got elected. The only thing I can say is that, like, it's a long-term project of basically saying your economic interests are far more real to you than whether, you know, Adam and Steve get married, you know, somewhere. And I don't know. You know, it's a hard.
Don't you think it would also help if the Democrats ran more on people's economic interests?
That's what I was about to say, Jamie. Just like a lot of this is top down too, right? It's what does the party feel like to people, right? Does it feel like it's working for you, or does it feel like culturally they're more representative of those niche issues? So there's no delineation in average people's minds in Alabama between the two parties economically, and they might even side with the Republicans because they culturally identify with them more. And that's directly the fault of Democrats for not putting that to the forefront.
But how do you reckon with what Jacob is saying? Or Jacob, how do you resolve that question of the commissioner of the electric commission, or whatever it was, who was running on literally like more money for you, less expense on your electricity?
Right. Well, I guess my kind of the way that I answered when I was asked on that radio program was that I think that Democrats are going to, like Emma and Jamie were saying, they're going to have to kind of build up people's trust. And now I don't think that means at the top of the ticket we have somebody saying Medicare for all, like you've been saying over the past couple of weeks. I don't know that that's necessarily a positive or a negative, because you can say Medicare for all and people aren't going to believe you, or believe that would be a good thing, because, you know, the Democrat running for a public service commission was saying all the right things as far as economics were concerned, but there was no difference among, you know, working class and wealthy Alabamians as far as whether they voted for Democrats or Republicans. It was all racial. So I think that it's going to take building up local institutions and local parties to build people's trust in the party, and build people's trust that this is going to be a party that fights for them And I don't think that it can come from the top or from a Senate candidate or any statewide campaign. You know, in Madison County, where I'm at, Doug Jones was at, like, this is a competitive county. Doug Jones only lost this county by 3 points. We should have Democrats running for every single office here in Madison County, and there was not a single local Democrat running for any of these local offices. There were 20 different races. Not a single candidate was running. There were only 3 Democrats on my ballot at all. That was Joe Biden, Doug Jones, and Laura Casey running for the Public Service Commission. There were no other Democrats on my ballot, 20-something other races.
Wow.
I think that,
let me militant apathy just IM'd me, and he writes, this is exactly what I've been saying. I know where your all's heart is, but what he's saying is true about the South, bro. The Bernie shit is outweighed by the social race dynamic. Unless you have overwhelming population of black women like Atlanta. My 12th grade econ teacher was Mo Brooks's mom. That should give you some anecdotal context for if economics outweighs social issues. I mean, the only thing is that, you know, what you're suggesting is that the Democrats need to invest and make sure that there's, you know, people running for down ballot races. And it could be the case. I mean, I think like in, you know, at least, I mean, I think there is value in investing in every state. I subscribe to the idea of a 50-state strategy. But in terms of like pouring money into Alabama, it might be the case that like the return on investment is just not high enough here. We can start to build something maybe very localized, but it wouldn't be the first place that I would go, because there are some principles about the Democratic Party that aren't going to change. I don't want them to change, that have to do with race, that have to do with, you know, rights for women in terms of their sovereignty over their own body, or rights for, men or women to marry someone of the same sex. I mean, the Democratic Party should not give an inch on those things, and
they should actually do better on them.
Yes, and in the short to midterm, at the very least, those things are going to be associated with, you know, in opposition to the identity that people have of themselves in places like Alabama. I mean, there's just some places where I think it's like, you don't need a candidate to win there. And, you know, Alabama is one of those places where it's like, it's good if you have the opportunity to put the Republicans on the defensive there, do it, because it's going to make them expend resources where they wouldn't want to, but it's a problem.
Well, look.
Right. Well, you know, even the local races, they don't take a lot to be competitive. And, you know, like I said, here in Madison County, Doug Jones only lost by 3 points. Like, this is a competitive county. It can be. And
recruit people to run, Jacob. You got to recruit people to run.
Right.
I have a lot of thoughts on this issue, because it is true and very depressing that class consciousness in this country is at an all-time low right now. And you can track that with the decline of organized labor, which really started with the neoliberal turn of the 1970s and continues to this day. Like you're saying, people vote on social issues. The Democrats don't run on economically progressive policies that they do have. B, I don't think they are different enough from the Republicans to really break through all those layers of mystification and depoliticization, where these things operate as almost empty signifiers, right? Like, I guess you could say that the Democrats are to the left of the Republicans on race, but it seems to me like a whole lot of politics of representation without real liberation on the other end of it. Let's not forget that Joe Biden was a very racist candidate as well. Less racist than Donald Trump, sure, probably. But then again, he wrote the crime bill. He's been putting Black working class people in prison for decades now, and people forget about that stuff. So if we really want to bring back class consciousness to electoral politics, I think it starts really at the local level. I think when people have had no chances to experience solidarity, they're going to be a lot less likely to believe in a politics of solidarity, right? But, you know, you got to give them the chance. We got to be building independent working class institutions. We need autonomous labor organizing, tenant organizing, even just clubs for people who are left-leaning politically to go hang out together, because people right now are atomized. And this is another part of depoliticization that I was talking about, polis, right? They do not act as a group. They engage with politics the way that they engage as consumers. So maybe they'll consume media products. They'll get really upset about the Democrats or about the Republicans based on whatever party they identify with culturally and regionally. And then they vote also like they are, you know, picking out a product, and not like they're participating as citizens in a polis. So I think if we really build these opportunities for solidarity, for class consciousness, we will see this kind of consciousness return to the way that working class people vote in this country.
Well, that's also a cultural, a cultural battle in itself too, because the United States is a consumerist, individualistic society in some of the way that we've been taught. So like that reverts back to just like, there needs to be a cultural reckoning, and Democrats need to lead the way in that area.
Well, okay. I mean, the thing that, I think maybe as an assessment of American society, that's one thing. But I think, like, on one hand, the fact of the matter is, whether it's because, it was Black people who had the biggest impact on getting Joe Biden the nomination. And so, like, I think, like, it is
Black people aren't a monolith. There are also plenty of Black voters who stayed
but the
home.
vast majority. I mean, I think, like, what I'm saying is the majority of Black people voted for Joe Biden, and certainly in the context of where the race went. I mean, I think there was two, and I think what Jacob is saying is that in the issue in Alabama is not that. The message about race is not resonating amongst Black voters in Alabama. It is resonating too much with white people in Alabama who are voting against that vision. So I don't think the
both.
reason why. Well, no, it's not both. I mean, he's just telling you right now, it's not both.
Well, maybe not specifically in Alabama, but certainly in other parts of the country.
Let's talk about Alabama, because this is what we're talking about. Like, I want to try and like actually dig into this, because yes, I do think that people pick their politics like they pick, their consumerist. And I do think that there is a depoliticization. And I do think that there is not the class consciousness. And I do think that there is mystification about why people should vote, according to me anyways. But I also think that there's other people who might have a different set of values in which they vote upon. And we can say that that's not valid, right? Like, you should be voting exclusively on your material interests, unless, of course, you're a wealthy person, in which case you shouldn't. But because you don't want,
we don't
want to be
care about
taxed.
them.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people who, who are out there. Those votes actually also help Joe Biden as well. And
I mean, they're welcome to vote for progressives. I just don't think we should center our plans around getting them.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if we're going to say people should vote on their material interests, then we got to be clear that if they do that, we're also inviting a lot of people to vote against us in these instances. And so
if it's 1-to-1, though, like, wealthy people would be outnumbered, but that's just not the reality.
Without a doubt. But it's not. That's not the reality.
Less people should vote on their material interests.
When you have
the wealthy should vote altruistically.
The question is, when you have a Democratic candidate running explicitly on the material benefits of them becoming the chair of the electrical commission or whatever it is, saying you will pay less. And there is absolutely, it moves no one based on any other factor except for race. What does the Democratic Party do? I don't want like an assessment of like all the problems with society that lead to this. It's like, what is the action that is being taken? That's what Jacob is asking. Like, what does he do? He's got a radio show. Like, what does he do to move the ball forward?
Yeah, well, it's a long-term project and it's not going to happen overnight. And the answer is long and it's complicated, and it has to do not only with what the Democratic Party does, but with what workers do outside of it to self-organize, spread class consciousness, spread solidarity, and eventually, hopefully, make some form of social transformation so that our politics get, back down to what they should actually be about. And also, I would reject the idea that social issues can't even be divorced from the economic. That's another thing they need to do, right? Like you got a white working class person out there saying, well, how does it help me? How do civil rights help me? How does it help me to, defund the police or whatever? And
or to have gay marriage.
Yeah, and you got to show people that it's all connected and that the stuff that benefits the most marginalized members of the working class benefits the working class as a whole.
But the gay marriage does not necessarily benefit, just the benefits are not in any way exclusive to the working class. I mean, you get a host of advantages when you're married. You get a set of rights, and that is going to benefit wealthy people, probably in some respects, maybe more, right? I mean, like you get tax advantages and this and that.
I was thinking more about along the lines of racial justice. I think gay marriage as an issue is pretty much settled now.
Jacob, is gay marriage a settled issue in Alabama?
Among the political class, I would say so, but among rank and file Republican voters, I would definitely not say that. I come from a very kind of religious community, and
we have
definitely not
of
settled.
Donald Trump's 70 million votes. What is the number are self-described evangelicals? Is it 35 million? Is it 30 million? Those people, this is not a settled issue in terms of the voting incentives of a lot of people out there. I mean, and we have to accept certain realities.
I got somebody to, they were like, oh yeah, Medicare for all, that sounds good. Free college, that's fine. Taxing the rich, that's all good. Gay marriage, this was like 2016 and again in 2017 and 2018. Like gay marriage and abortion were the things that they were like, no, there's no way I could ever vote for a Democrat. But, another thing that Jamie was saying was like what you do outside of the ballot box. I think that it's important to build up the party locally. But I think that building up organized labor is another incredibly important thing to building up a kind of working class politics here in the South. At least, my co-host on the Valley Labor Report, he is the president of a machinists union in Decatur, Alabama, with 300 members, most of them, white conservative men, and they voted for him to be their president, despite the fact that he is so vocally left-wing. He wore an Antifa shirt in his to his bargaining committee meeting, while he was on the negotiating committee with the company. He's not in the closet, so to speak, but these people know that
he's going to get them the best deal.
And
he's going to get them the best deal.
Right. And so if we can get, folks like David can kind of foster that trust in their communities among these people, then maybe when these people get on the ballot for local races, they'll say, oh, well, I don't agree with him on this or that issue, but he's one of us, and he's going to fight for us no matter, because I've talked to some of his conservative members, and they have so much love and respect and solidarity with him. And, I believe that if he was on the ballot, they'd vote for him. I think that labor is an incredibly important thing to try to build up. And, that's kind of what we center the show around.
Right.
But,
there has to be some mechanism. All right.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Thanks for calling.
That is a really important element of what I was just saying, for sure.
Without a doubt.
And also just to add one final thing here, I do think that culturally, a lot of people in the South, and again, I'm from the Northeast, so take this with a grain of salt, but feel alienated from the Democratic Party culturally based on religion, and it's not just evangelicals; it's also a lot of Black churchgoers in the South as well. And so, in terms of the left-wing flank of the Democratic Party, I should say, where there's kind of this depiction of them as coastal atheists or whatever. So I think there could be some inroads there where it's a more traditionally liberal approach that incorporates spirituality and Christianity as a part of the economic message.
I mean, I think, the like places like Alabama are, from a long-term perspective, good place to attempt to do organizing, like exactly what Jacob is doing on some level, and his radio partner. I think from an electoral standpoint, it's probably not worth a major party pouring money in there until there is more of an infrastructure on the ground. I mean, it's almost like you need more fertile soil before you start to try and grow anything there.
And you might not want them anyway. I know people in Texas that it's one of the nice things about Texas compared to New York is there isn't a massive, a structure that's ingrained in like that you can actually have some movement up the ladder there.
Yeah. I mean, we got to build from the ground up. I agree with that. And I'm honestly not sure what it would do at this point to run more progressive candidates. But you know what? There are reasons to be hopeful because all over the place, when people got to vote directly on the issues, in a lot of conservative places, they voted for the more progressive thing. They voted for the thing that benefited the working class.
Yes.
$15 minimum wage in Florida. We have drug criminalization, all sorts of different places. And then in, California, which is supposed to be a blue state, they basically made it legal for Uber to keep its workers in a cage. So
it was not just 22 too. In California, they also voted down. I think it was Proposition 21, which was supposed to roll back. People have heard me talk about Proposition 13 because we got it in Massachusetts a year or two later as Proposition 3. And I remember that year that it happened, like all of the sports were shut down in my high school, and all of the electives in the schools just radically in 1 year just went to absolute garbage because there was a law, Proposition 13 in California. And this must have been late 70s, early 80, maybe 1980. And it limited 1978. It limited the property taxes, and ostensibly it was to protect homeowners, but it also limited property taxes on commercial property. And this Proposition 21 was going to maintain the cap on property taxes for residential, but blow it up for commercial, which would obviously allow you to raise a lot more money and also fund things like schools, which unfortunately we fund through property taxes. California shut that down. I mean, there is no, part of the problem is that it's one thing to try and go out there with a proposal that is, provides material benefits for the vast majority of the people who will vote on it. And it's another to communicate that in a way, because we also have like a citizenry that is, as you say, depoliticized and in many respects just doesn't, that is susceptible to all sorts of mechanisms and to sort of for people to not really fully get what they're voting on.
I would stress the depolitization of the politicians as well. Let's talk about this fair tax that failed in Illinois. And it's because they call it a fair tax, right? Like,
yeah,
right. The fair tax label might have foiled Illinois' amendment. Fair branding often not trusted by voters from politicians. This is a Democrat software problem. This is I don't know why we're calling it, because they're allergic to any kind of class-based thing.
Call it
frankly
rich tax.
Exactly.
Call it rich tax. That's it.
Exactly.
And then
they're so afraid of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'll say one more thing about, the prospect of running progressive candidates in places where, maybe they'll lose this time around, or maybe the centrists will lose too, like in Kentucky, right? Like if they had run Charles Booker with his Hood to the Holler program, which was a very inspiring, potentially dangerous to the ruling class idea to connect up rural and urban issues, the working class all over the state and cities and the country, maybe they wouldn't have won. But they might have laid the groundwork for some sort of future movement, some sort of future shift. Get out there, like, you got to talk to people.
Yeah, I mean,
most of these people, they never hear from Democrats or Republicans, and
that's
like
what Doug Jones said.
You got to talk to them.
That's what Doug Jones said in that Washington Post article. He said the Democrats, the DCCC, the DSCC, invest in candidates instead of investing in districts. In other words, you need to build an organization and you need to build relationships within the context of a district that is distinct from a candidate's campaign. And that's what I think Booker would have done in Kentucky, without a doubt. I mean, he would, I don't know that he would have won. I suspect he would have lost. But the infrastructure that he would have created would exist today, as opposed to Amy McGrath's house of, like, advertisements.
Yeah, house of money burning on
vaporware,
on fire.
Absolutely. So, they got to move away from this idea that, if you don't win, you've gained nothing, right? Because we run message campaigns all the time. I mean, obviously, when the DSA endorses a candidate, we want them to win, but that's not the only purpose that they serve, right? They talk to people, they spread class consciousness around, and they could even be a sort of loss leader for the kind of, social democratic, for now, politics that we're going to need in order to break out of this eternal cycle of shitty Democrats and shitty Republicans alternating forever.
Yeah, and it's a part of, just really quickly, like the Democrats' view of politics, where they just, as Doug Jones said, just invest in candidates. It's glitzy. Beyonce's going to endorse you, but that's not the kind of politics that has any sustained power and build something. If you're seriously interested in accumulating power, which I don't know if the Democrats are that serious about it.
All right, folks, I'm sorry. That's all the time we have for calls. Of course, everybody's shortchanged. Everybody gets screwed on the calls. But we'll take some IMs. Normalizes amobudgification. Normalizes SAM objectification. I see. 38% of Alabamans set out in 2020. Jones lost the election by less than 478,000 votes. That's only 13% of the electorate that sat out. That is not an insurmountable number. Blue Alabama is not a pipe dream. It's just going to take a lot of work. You know what I would like to see is, like, a guy like Jones do what Stacey Abrams did, which is go back in, take what infrastructure you had built there, build upon that to build out a durable, electorate. And, you're not going to do it in one cycle. Alabama may take, 10, 12 years till you can get to that type of thing. Maybe it will take forever, but it's definitely something that I think, like, that model needs to be pursued more. Mike, Sam, you mentioned that Manchin left the door open for DC statehood, but that would require ending the filibuster, which he would never vote for. So we are screwed. Is that true?
I think most likely, yeah.
Oh, that's true. You could do just to break the. I wonder, though, if there's some type of privileged motion for that. I'm not 100% sure about that. I gotta check on that, but it's possible. Dan Purdy. Oh gosh, darn it. We'll do it.
We'll save it for you on Friday.
Okay. As a black guy, I just wanted to say.
I mean, it's still a developing story, so maybe
I just wanted to say.
Yeah, maybe we'll have more info.
White Republicans rule, and I'm under no duress saying this. Folks will figure that out when we'll do that on Friday. Short wrap. I encourage everyone to check out today's Democracy Now! Segment on the media's uninformed false narrative of Latinos voting significantly more for Trump this time around. Left is best. Check that out. Lindsey Graham cracker. Problem with Democratic leadership is they have the same problem with people like Nate Silver. They act like cultural forces are static and can only be a product of the current situation. People like dynamic actors. They like their congressperson making news. They like their congressperson doing community organizing.
That's Katie Porter is a great example of that. I mean, in the red district, they like the fact that she's, making headlines. And then culturally, I agree with you. If you lead from a place of strength, then you're way more likely to win people over, as opposed to just capitulating to what they already believe.
A Square. Sam, in case I don't get on calls, consider getting Megan Day on the show. She had a good discussion at Jacobin Talks. has a very nuanced analysis of the election and important insights about the Democrats and the electorate. Yeah, we should do that. Sam's butt. Tim Heidecker's new stand-up got 2 stars from The Guardian. Pretty generous of them. Yeah, it's. I hope that was out of 10, right? Worn Out's crunchy. Sound like a bad trip watching Elmo's World. All right, 5 more of these. Mo, at just what point do we say F off to people who just hate other groups of people? They are actively putting aside their class interests. They aren't stupid. They're just hateful. I mean, I think, we're not there yet. I mean, that's the easiest way I could answer that is like there needs to be more work. It really shouldn't come down to that as much as like you take an opportunity where you can get it.
Yeah. I'm not willing to abandon any segment of the working class just yet, but it is true that I might care. No, not even going to say that. But like a lot of focus has been placed on conservative white working class people and maybe not enough on working class people of color who may be more potentially progressive, but don't turn out because they are not being offered enough by the Democratic Party.
Yeah, the media mystifies, and the Democrats do too, the white working class in this sort of storybook way. It's pretty gross.
Chadia Stevens, wouldn't they have done the fraud inside the Biden-Harris van, not out in the open next to the van? That's a good point. Yeah.
The boldness is the point. You want to menace these people.
Yeah, it's exactly. Didn't you see that Silver Streak, that movie Silver Streak with Richard Pryor and what's his name?
Gene Wilder.
Gene Wilder. Like the louder they are, or maybe that was actually Young Frankenstein. The louder you are, the least people pay attention to you. The less attention people pay to you. So the more out in the open you are, people just assume like, oh, I'm not going to, they can't possibly be filling out votes in that table next to the van they've set up. Why would they do that? D over DT. I get what the right means when they say libs. They mean anyone on the left. But what does the left mean when they say libs? Is that short for neoliberal? Won't this cause confusion among casual viewers and the not yet politically active? Yeah. What is the difference between what is libs when we say that?
Oh, geez. I feel like Emma's more diplomatic than me, so I'm gonna let her go.
I would say probably I think neolibs is a good shorthand way, but Democratic Party stands, people who are invested in incremental change and
West Wing type believers, that sort
love
of crap.
Aaron Sorkin, are quick to give deference to the Obama types, often corny, often seething slowly underneath it all with hatred for the progressive wing, even more so than centrist Republicans, etc.
But that's all like cultural. Like, is there a difference between neoliberal and liberal?
At this point, I don't think there's much of a difference because everybody who's on the right side seems to identify themselves as progressive.
Well, liberalism, small L liberalism is basically an ideology that goes along with capitalism and undergirds a lot of our essential institutions. And, some people position socialism as something that can complete the liberal project, right? Because you can't really have liberty if you are not getting enough to eat, et cetera. So, there's socialists who want to keep the good things about liberalism, like freedom of speech, yada, yada, and, improve the bad things. That is one way to look at it. I mean, if you want to get real technical about it, liberalism predates neoliberalism, right? Because obviously we've had capitalism for a lot longer than we've been in this current neoliberal phase of capitalism, which is at base what neoliberalism is. I realize it's also an ideology. The ideology grew out of the base of what's going on in the economy, not the other way around. Like, if you want to get real technical about it, social democracy is technically the leftmost wing of liberalism, but that's never how I use libs when I say it colloquially, and I don't think it's how anybody else does either.
Yeah, I mean, it's mainly, there's not a whole lot of people positively advancing neoliberalism, but I would say it's mainly liberals who are skeptical of a progressive agenda or a socialist, particularly like a Bernie Sanders type agenda.
Like Thomas Frank still refers to himself as a liberal. And that's the thing. Is that I think there's some confusion.
I think there's good liberals.
And I think like the
if you're not super online, it's hard to understand that difference.
Exactly.
And yeah, I have conservative, people in my life who don't understand the difference. So
if you're not online, you probably also aren't particularly interested in the distinctions between those two things, I would imagine.
Right.
Yes,
exactly.
I think so. I think that is there is something to be said about, one of the things that the Biden campaign said that they did is they stayed completely off of offline.
Yeah, at a certain point, it starts to look kind of like libertarians talking about the different flavors of that when it's completely divorced from actual power.
And I do get frustrated with leftists who are, basically social democrats saying really mean things about liberals when from where I'm sitting, they're only a few clicks to the right of them.
Or people saying liberals always break fascist when they were liberals like 5 years ago.
Matty Moron, why hasn't Pompeo called in the OAS to do some analysis of our election results to determine if fraud occurred? Indeed. James in Jersey, not sure why you think Pompeo was joking when he repeated the statement later in the afternoon. If he was joking, it was kidding on the square. I think he just got off on it, to be honest with you. But I think, again, there is some of that kidding on the square. Anarcho MPC. PMC, someone on Twitter said the current transition situation is the platonic friend saying, what if we pretended to kiss version of a coup? La Rob, I was a poll worker in LA and there's no such thing as a poll worker uniform. I used to live in Clark County. They don't wear uniforms. That whistleblower is total BS. Left is best. Yeah, I was wondering about that. The poll.
Yeah, it's like a little conductor hat. She was wearing a hat in her shadow. It had like a little button on top. I thought, it might have been like a cartoon train conductor type.
All right, two more. Mick Mackerel. Hi from Germany, Sam. Love the show. Congrats for hopefully having postponed fascism in the U.S. for now. It's still alive and well over here. The fight continues as it is for you. Special regards to the comrade Jamie. Left is best. Keep up the great work. And the final I am of the day, I get skeptical when people rag on defund the police slogan, to be honest, but I think Sam landed on a good one yesterday with unburden the police. Also, Nomiki should run for office. She did. All right, folks. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught.